At precisely 6 a.m., the sound of the alarm clock pierces the air. Sandy drags herself out of bed and begins her morning routine with a quick shower. After her shower, she prepares a simple breakfast. Grabbing a clean bowl from the dishwasher, she empties into it a packet of instant oatmeal. She pours in a cup of milk, stirs and heats the mixture in the microwave. While waiting for her oatmeal to cook, she dresses for the day, mindful of the weather. Fully dressed now, she removes her oatmeal from the microwave, which has now cooled just enough to suit her taste. It is her favorite flavor, apple cinnamon. As she savors each bite, she is reminded of her mother, who always made sure Sandy ate a warm breakfast before leaving the house in the morning. Checking the time on her phone, she hurriedly swallows the last few mouthfuls of oatmeal before heading out. As she steps into the street, a gust of wind blows back her hair. She covers her head with the hood of her coat, tightens the scarf around her neck, and braces for her walk to the train station. After settling into her seat on the train, memories of her mother stir again. She takes out her phone and texts, "Hey mom, thanks for the scarf you knit me. It came in real handy this morning. Love always." Pulling into the parking lot of the largest supermarket in town, Joe could already see it was going to be a challenge to find parking on this Saturday morning. He decides to first drop off his wife Melissa, so she could get a head start on the shopping they need to do. Meanwhile, he battles to find a free spot amongst the crowd of other waiting cars. Inside, Joe finally finds Melissa, whose cot already loaded with packages of organic snacks and drinks. He knows Melissa is easily tempted by fancy words that promise health benefits. It makes her feel good to know that she is making healthy decisions. In the past, Joe would try to reason with her, explaining that health is not about consuming specific items, and more about general lifestyle. Today, he decides to simply move on. As the chef in the family, Joe looks forward every week to the process of selecting meats and vegetables, imagining all the ways he can flavor and cook them. Free samples are being offered at the familiar locations. Melissa makes sure to hit up every station. They agree the chicken sausage is their favorite and buy 2 packs. The buy one get one free fresh pasta attracts Joe, while the sale on cheesecake draws Melissa. As they wait in line to check out, Melissa examines their overflowing shopping cart and realizes that they are over budget. She puts back the snacks and drinks that were clearly impulse buys and happily claims she is learning to be a great shopper. Joe can only smile at the expression on her face. 5 months ago when they first got married, he never imagined he would enjoy these Saturday morning grocery trips. Now, he finds in them a peaceful satisfaction, a welcome change from his work all week. All week, Frank and Bob have been looking forward to Sunday afternoon. That is when their favorite football team, the Philadelphia Eagles, plays their first game of the season. The Eagles have a new coach, and many new, young, and talented players. Football can be a very unpredictable game, with weather, injuries, referees, and luck all affecting the outcome of the game. On top of that, new players and coaches may need some time to learn to work as a team. For almost a decade now, Frank and Bob have watched Eagles games together. They met through work, but their friendship continues, even though Frank left the company a few years back. Their wives have become close and sometimes even join them for the games. When their sons were still young, they used to be just as excited about these Sunday afternoons. Now in high school, they'd rather hang out with their friends than their fathers. Nonetheless, Frank and Bob have kept up their friendship and this tradition, and couldn't think of a better way to spend Sunday afternoons. This week, they will be watching the game at Bob's house, who is anxious to show off the new sound system he installed in his basement. As Frank walks up the driveway, carrying a pack of their favorite beer, Bob walks out to meet him, already dressed in Eagles uniform. After some playful punching, they come together for a quick embrace. Once inside, they are greeted by the familiar sounds of the pre-game show. It's going to be a great season. Julie was sitting in bed late at night playing with her brand new smart TV. Earlier that week, she had been visited by her children and grandchildren to celebrate her 70th birthday, and had received the phone as a gift from her granddaughter Mary. Julie had been widowed for 5 years now. Since she lived hours away from the rest of the family, Mary thought the phone would be a good way for them to keep in touch and take up some of her time. Up until then, Julie had never really been interested in catching up with modern technology, but finally owning her own smart TV made her feel youthful, and she decided to join Facebook since that was what she had noticed all the younger people were doing. However, when making her profile page, she was embarrassed to put up a picture of herself since she thought she looked much too wrinkly, and nobody would want to talk to her. To remedy this, she downloaded a picture of a beautiful 20-something-year-old from Google, posted it under her name, and went to sleep. The next morning, Julie woke up and enthusiastically logged into Facebook in hopes that she would have 1 or 2 new friends. She could not believe her eyes. Her inbox was full of friend requests from dozens and dozens of young handsome men that were complimenting her beauty and wanted to know all about her. Julie decided to accept only the best looking ones and began chatting with them day and night, never letting them know that they were actually talking to a grandma. The next time Julie met up with Mary, she thanked her so much for the phone and remarked, "I haven't felt so young and pretty in years." Mary was confused and asked, "Why?" Julie just gave a mischievous smile and changed the topic. Jennifer loved going out to bowl every Tuesday night. She always liked bowling, but had never joined a bowling league until her friend, Paul, told her about a new league one day. The two friends enjoyed going to Lucky Lanes on weekends, but had to wait for the league games to finish before they could bowl. It did not bother them since they knew what time the league games were over. Paul talked to the manager of Lucky Lanes one day and discovered that a new league was forming soon. "That's great," said Paul. "I'm going to ask Jennifer if she wants to join, too," added Paul. When Jennifer heard the news, she wasn't as excited as Paul thought she would be. "What's wrong, Jen?" asked Paul. "I just don't know if I'm good enough to play in a league," answered Jennifer. "Don't you have to be a good bowler to bowl in a league?" Paul thought about it for a while before going back to the manager to ask if the new league was for good bowlers, or anyone could join. The manager told him that this new league was for beginners, and added that Paul and Jennifer would be some of the best players in the new league. Paul was very excited once again. When he told Jennifer what the manager had said, Jennifer's response was, "Where do I sign up?" This made Paul very happy. Before long, the two friends were bowling away in their new team and league. The manager was right. Paul and Jennifer were among the best players. They both loved bowling in a league. They got to wear team bowling shirts and hats, and all the refreshments were included in the league fees. Soon they were knocking down pins. At the end of the season, their team won the trophy for coming in the first place. When William worked in Santa Fe Springs, California, back in the 90s, he told me he thought the building he worked at was haunted. "It really is," said William. "I have had more than a few incidents happen to me while I was working alone, late at night," he continued. William was working as a manager for a very busy chemical distribution company at the time. In order to keep up with his work, he sometimes had to work at night, or go in on weekends to catch up with his paperwork. William was a sensible man. He was not the type of person that would fly off the handle in troubling situations. He was always very calm and composed. This is what made his story believable. I knew he wasn't the type to make things up. One night, William went to work after dark and thought nothing of it. His former manager had told him that he might hear some weird noises coming from the warehouse, but it was only the 55-gallon drums expanding and contracting. During the heat of the day, the drums would expand, and at night, when it cooled off, the drums would contract, sometimes making a sound. William was not worried. That night he was sitting at his desk when he heard what sounded like someone knocking on the door leading to the warehouse. William dismissed it as a drum popping and ignored it. A few moments later, the sound was back, and this time it was louder. Since there was no one else in the building, he became a bit nervous, but continued working. Soon the noises got louder and louder. The final straw was when he heard someone walking above the ceiling of his office. This scared him quite a bit, but again he ignored it. Finally, it happened again, and this time William ran into the warehouse to look above his office, but no one was there. After that, William never worked at night again. Jerry was 17 when his family decided to move out their apartment in the city of Riverdale. They had lived there for nearly 10 years. In those 10 years, Jerry had made dozens of friends from around the city. He didn't understand why they had to move. Jerry wished he could stay behind while his family left to Arizona. He knew things weren't ever going to be the same if he left Riverdale, California. "Why do we have to move?" Jerry would ask, sounding depressed. His parents had answered that question countless times already. Despite knowing the answer, Jerry was reluctant to believe it, so he kept asking, "Why do we have to move?" Jerry asked time after time. The simple truth was that Jerry and his family just could not afford to live in Riverdale any longer. It was hard for Jerry to accept that truth. On the day before the move, Jerry walked around the familiar places in Riverdale. He walked passing the oak tree where he first kissed a girl. He walked past the corner mini market where he would bring back milk every Sunday. He passed by his high school where he had learned and discovered his love of math and science. Jerry knocked on the doors of friends' houses to say one final goodbye. "Goodbye, Tom," Jerry told his best friend. "Goodbye, Jane," Jerry told his girlfriend. The night fell when Jerry finally finished bidding his farewells to everybody he knew. "Goodbye, Riverdale," Jerry said, looking out his bedroom window as he went to sleep. That night, Jerry dreamed of moving to Arizona and making friends on the first day there. Everything in Arizona seemed great in his dream. The following morning when he awoke, Jerry no longer felt so bad about moving. "Everything is going to be all right," Jerry said to himself as he stepped into the moving van on his way to Arizona. Joel had been working at a bookstore for 4 months. Although 4 months might seem like a long time, Joel felt like it had been only 1 month since he was hired. Working at a bookstore was a dream job for Joel. He couldn't believe he got hired on the day of his interview. Joel felt grateful to be working at where he was. He loved to brag all about his job to his friends and family. Joel loved reading books on his spare time. His favorite author was Mark Twain. Joel's most beloved book of his was The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Working at a bookstore not only gave Joel access to books, but allowed him to interact with other fellow bookworms. Joel often would recommend books to customers, and customers would do the same for Joel. Every now and then, he would come across a classic book and take it for himself to read. Joel's manager allowed him one book for free once a week. It was difficult to decide which book to take sometimes. Joel was getting paid $300 every 2 weeks. Sometimes he would surpass this amount when he worked overtime. After a couple of months, Joel had saved up enough money to finally purchase his first car. Buying a car was the main reason Joel wanted to start working. He began shopping online for used vehicles. Joel already knew what kind of car he wanted. He had first seen a picture of it in a magazine, and since then, had dreamed of owning one of his very own. His dream car was 1984 BMW. Joel wanted a black one with 2 doors. He would search on the internet until he finally found it. Joel could not believe when he discovered a seller with the car. Learning to drive seemed scary for Joel at first. He had recently purchased his first car, which was now sitting on his driveway, looking clean and shiny. The previous owner had maintained it for years and had spent a lot of money, restoring it to its original condition. The car was a BMW, made in the year 1984. It was black and had only 2 doors. The interior was also black and had leather seating. The vehicle looked practically new to Joel, despite it being older than the new owner of it. Joel was eager to start driving his new car. At 21, Joel had felt the need to be driving already. He was attending college in the city of Los Angeles, working at a bookstore in the city of Montebello, and living in the city of Bell. Having a car would make traveling much more convenient. Joel had been getting around by means of public transportation. He was ready to stop taking the bus to school and work. The first thing Joel had to do was to go to DMV to register the car under his name. After that, he took a driving manual book from DMV to study for the written test. Passing the written test was the only way to get a driving permit. Joel studied for a few days and passed his test. With the permit in hand, Joel next had to find someone to teach him how to drive. Joel already knew who to ask for driving lessons. If I'm going to teach you how to drive, you're going to have to commit 100%. Do you understand? Joel's uncle asked him. Yes, sir, responded Joel. After a month full of trial and error, Joel finally learned how to drive his car. Although it was scary at first, driving eventually became easy enough for Joel. Do you believe in ghosts? Alvin asked his brother Levi one night, as they were lying down in bed around 11 at night. I don't think so, Levi replied. Alvin and Levi shared a room together. Why not? Asked Alvin. I have never seen one, Levi said. Alvin was 12 years old and Levi was 18. I think I saw one, Levi, Alvin told his brother, sounding frightened. Go to sleep, Alvin, Levi told his brother, as he turned around, in his bed to face the closet. There's no such thing as ghost, Levi said. Alvin and Levi were lying on separate beds. Levi had fallen asleep half an hour ago, but Alvin was still awake. He was having a hard time trying to go to sleep. A sound was keeping him awake. It sounded like someone was walking out in the hallway, right outside his bedroom door. It was completely dark. Alvin was curious to find out who was sauntering out in the hallway. 15 minutes had passed and the creaking hadn't stopped. Alvin slowly rose from his bed. He moved towards his door, taking one step every 2 seconds. When he finally reached his door, he put his hand on the doorknob and gradually began to turn it. The walking had not ceased. Alvin, what are you doing? Levi said right before Alvin could open the door. I think there's a ghost in the hallway, Alvin replied. Levi rose to his feet and went to the door. I'll go with you, Levi said. The two opened the door together and popped their heads out the door to take a look. You see, it was nothing, Levi said. Alvin and Levi went back to bed. Levi again fell asleep before Alvin. Alvin could not go to sleep. There was someone walking in the hallway. Bobby loved to eat. He ate hamburgers, French fries, hot dogs, pizza, donuts, and ice cream, just to name a few. No matter how much Bobby ate, he never got a stomach ache. It is no surprise that Bobby weighs 250 pounds. It might be surprising to know that Bobby is only 15 years old. Bobby didn't care that he was big. He was content with how he looked and loved eating as much as he could. Bobby liked to tell jokes to his friends. Knock, knock, Bobby would say. Who's there? Friends would ask. Gorilla, Bobby replied. Gorilla who? They'd ask back. Gorilla me a hamburger. Bobby replied, delivering the punchline. The joke was in how the word gorilla sounded like grill. Bobby's joke always left people in stitches. Even though Bobby was popular and friendly, he was still teased by some kids in school. Fat Boy Bobby was the nickname the mean kids gave to Bobby. Whenever Bobby heard the nickname, he would reply with gusto, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." The bullies would funnily reply, "I bet you would eat those sticks and stones, Fat Boy Bobby," and scurry off running. Bobby did not let idiotic name calling bother him. He had more important things to think about, like what he was going to eat for dinner. Bobby knew that one day he would have to lose weight if he wished to live a longer life. Until that day came, Bobby would continue eating what he wanted and as much he wanted. Jenny is a 5th grader. She is considered one of the most popular girls in her class. She is very pretty, but that is not why she is considered popular. She is popular because she is known to be among the brightest in her class. She can do the most cartwheels in a row, but mostly, she has the talent to dance. Last year, she entered the school's dance competition and won the first place. Her whole class was there to support her. Since that day, she has been the class attraction. This year, the school is holding another dance competition, but there has been a change in this year's competition. The competition has to be done in pairs. Jenny's class was looking up to her with high expectations of her winning again this year. On the other hand, Jenny was unsure of this year's outcome. She wanted to enter the competition, but she had never danced with a partner before. She decided to ask some of the boys in her class to enter with her. They all said no to her because they did not know how to dance. Jenny was becoming hesitant about joining. She finally decided to turn to one of her closest friends, Carl. Jenny and Carl had known each other since the 1st grade. Carl was reluctant to join at first because he also didn't know how to dance. Jenny insisted. He eventually agreed to join the competition. Jenny was happy and relieved. However, she was still worried because she knew her class was counting on her to win this year's competition. All she needed was some time and practice in order to increase her chances of winning. This time, it was going to be more of a challenge considering the fact that Carl was not a good dancer. The competition was in 2 months, and only time could predict her chances of winning. After selecting Carl as her partner, Jenny needed to start planning for the dance competition at her school. The competition started in 2 months. Jenny was aware that Carl was not a great dancer. She had to dedicate some time in helping him improve his skill. On the first few days of preparation, Jenny had planned out their dance routine, with the help of her teacher. They were going to be dancing to Jailhouse Rock by Elvis Presley. Jenny and Carl spent the first 2 weeks memorizing their steps and cues to their dance. Carl was pretty clumsy at first. He eventually got the hang of it. They spent the rest of the time perfecting their moves. The day of the competition was almost near. Jenny and Carl were beginning to get nervous. They were going up against 9 other pairs from the same school. The day of the competition arrived. Carl had not become a great dancer, but had definitely improved since he began. Since Jenny won last year's competition, she was to perform with Carl last. The pairs that were performing this year were better dancers compared to last year's competition. As each pair took the stage one by one, Jenny grew more anxious. Carl noticed this from Jenny and told her, "It'll be okay, Jenny. You are great, and I'm sure we'll win." Jenny felt better after hearing Carl's words. Soon, it was their turn to perform. They walked on stage and began to dance as soon as their song started to play. They were off to a great start. Jenny's class was there cheering them on. The crowd began cheering them on as well. Suddenly, Jenny tripped and fell. The crowd was shocked. Carl managed to get Jenny back up on time for their big finale. Jenny was upset because of her fall. After their performance, the judges tallied up the scores and were ready to announce the winner. Jenny and Carl won, but it was a close call. If it wasn't for Jenny's talent and Carl's quick thinking to keep the routine going, they wouldn't have won. They were both awarded with a trophy and medals. Jenny and Carl were full of cheer. It is the first day of the summer. George and his friend Kolos are planning on going on a camping trip. It is going to be the best camping trip, which will last 3 days. While Kolos makes invitations for their friends, George is going to make a list of activities to do while they are there. Last year, their camping trip was not entirely a success. They got a flat tire on the way to their campsite. They also had a bear take some of their food. They don't want to encounter that again. This year, they plan to go prepared. George is going to take a spare tire and gas, just in case they run out. Kolos is going to try and find a better method of storing food without attracting animals to their campsite. They don't want anything to ruin this year's trip. On this trip, George and Kolos have invited 10 of their friends. Everyone is excited. George has prepared his list of activities to do with his friends. They plan to go mountain climbing, hiking, kayaking, fishing, and to play a few games of flag football. For night activities, they plan to tell stories, sing songs along with George's guitar, and play some board games. Kolos and his friends have pitched in some money for food. With the list Kolos made, they are going to have food, vegetables, chicken, and fruit juice. The day of the camping trip is getting near. George and Kolos cannot wait. When the day comes, George and Kolos double-check to see if they have their things ready. At the last minute, George suddenly remembers that it is important to bring matches, lanterns, and flashlights. Kolos also suggests that they take binoculars for sightseeing. They are ready to go. It is going to be the best trip they have ever made. Anna woke up late one morning. She was supposed to meet up with a group of friends that morning at 8 o'clock. She woke up at 8:15 instead. Anna rushed to get ready. She quickly showered, put on her clothes. Then, she grabbed her toolbox and headed out on her bike. Anna and her friends were asked to paint 2 murals for the city's library. One of the murals was to be located on the outside, and the other on the inside. The owner of the library was the one who requested these murals. The reason was because he was a fan of Anna's art, and was planning to remodel the library. Both murals were going to be painted with a similar theme. They were both going to be paintings aimed to inspire people to read. Anna already had her ideas for both murals planned out. It was going to be colorful. Her friends were going to be there to help paint the large areas of the mural. Once Anna arrived, she noticed her friends waiting outside the library. Anna apologized for being late. She pulled out her ideas to show to her friends. Her friends were impressed and excited to begin painting. They first started by outlining the images of the ideas onto both walls. Next, they mixed their colors and began to paint. Painting the mural was a lot faster to do when you have the help of your friends. They finished both murals within 2 days. The new murals attracted the attention of local visitors to the library. The owner of the library was impressed and happy with the new look of his library. He awarded Anna and her friends with recognition and paid them for their labor. Anna was pleased. 2 years ago, Amy left her small hometown in England and moved to one of the biggest cities in the United States, New York. Amy knew the transition would be difficult at first, but was confident that she would love her new life and succeed in becoming a Broadway star. She had envisioned herself getting off the airplane and immediately making new friends with whom she would spend her nights exploring the city that never sleeps. Unfortunately, the reality of Amy's situation was far from the perfect life she had imagined. Her days were spent jumping from theater to theater looking for auditions. Although she was very pretty and great at acting, her accent made it difficult for her to get hired for any roles. Directors kept telling her to work on her American accent, but the more she practiced it, the more she sounded like a cowboy, rather than a New Yorker. Amy's nights were spent working at a diner in order to pay for her ridiculously expensive one-room apartment where the sinks always leaked, and the hot water never worked. To top it all off, the city that she had imagined as being filled with bright lights and friendly faces like in the movies was made up mostly of smelly alleys, big rats, and angry crowds that were always in a hurry to get somewhere. Still, Amy didn't let anything crush her spirits, and was determined to keep working hard until her dreams would come true. Finally one day, Amy was clearing some tables in the diner, while singing her favorite song as usual. "Excuse me," said a man in a nearby booth. "I couldn't help but notice that you have a beautiful voice." Amy blushed and thanked the man. "I'm actually casting for a star in my new Broadway musical of Mary Poppins," he continued. "How would you feel about acting?" Amy's heart raced with excitement, just as Frank Sinatra's New York began playing on the diner's jukebox. She was finally going to make it. John is a busy lawyer, whose whole day revolves around 2 things, work and his 2 daughters. Balancing the 2 things often proves to be very difficult, so John spends most of his day in a rush to do everything he needs to do, and get everywhere he needs to be. With such a hectic schedule, it is common to find John and his children in line at a McDonald's drive-thru, waiting for some burgers, fries, and shakes. "I know fast food isn't the healthiest thing I could give my daughters," admits John. "But it's the most convenient thing around when we're in a rush. Plus, it makes them happy." Unfortunately, this attitude towards the unhealthiness of fast food is one that so many parents in the US hold, and it is easy to understand why. Nowadays, nearly every single city in America is equipped with its own McDonald's. In Los Angeles alone, it can sometimes feel like there is one on every other corner when you're driving around. As if this didn't already make it hard enough for parents to avoid, McDonald's targets their famous Happy Meals to children so that every time they drive by the giant golden arches, children demand to go inside to get a new toy with their meal. Although it may be very hard for parents to have healthier meal options for their children, doing so is a necessity that this country can no longer ignore. Constantly consuming fast food is becoming a norm in American society, and is resulting in millions of people suffering from obesity and diabetes for the rest of their lives. Instead of teaching children that it is okay to give in to the temptation of a quick greasy meal, parents should get their children into the habit of healthy eating everywhere they go. In the end, children will be more thankful for living long, healthy, and happy lives, than for getting a cheap toy in a cardboard box. David and Melissa had been a happily married couple for 6 years. They lived a comfortably modest life in a small apartment, and had been saving up for years in preparation for the next giant step in their life, a baby. However, after repeatedly trying to get pregnant for a whole year, they consulted a doctor and received devastating news. Melissa would be unable to conceive a child for the rest of her life. The bad news struck Melissa terribly hard. Seeing his wife in such a distraught and depressed state broke David's heart. "Don't worry," he told her. "I'm going to make you the happiest woman in the planet, even if it's just the two of us." He then went to the bank, took out all their savings that had been held for the baby, and set out to do whatever he could to cheer his wife up. Since they no longer had to be careful with how much money they spent, David began splurging on everything he could think of. First, he took Melissa shopping for the finest and most beautiful clothes she could dream of. Then, they took an exotic vacation to the Florida Keys, where they spent a month exploring every island and spending thousands of dollars on the most beautiful hotels and most delicious foods they could find. When they finally returned home, Melissa said, "Oh, David, everything is perfect. I'm actually glad we don't have a child." David smiled, content with his wife's happiness, and walked over to check their voicemails from when they were away. The machine bleeped and then their doctor's voice came on saying, "Hi guys, great news. There was a mistake in the test results. You are actually 6 weeks pregnant. It's triplets." Andrea's big day was finally here. She had been accepted into the medical school of her dream in Boston, and was about to fly there to begin her new life. She had gotten the news of her acceptance 2 months ago, but had spent all that time so busy preparing for the move that she hadn't had time to realize how nervous she really was. It wasn't until it was time for her to get up from the plane seat that she realized her legs were shaking, her heart was racing, and her full head was sweating. "Keep calm," she kept repeating to herself the whole way to her new apartment. She had worked so hard to get here, and she knew that she had nothing to be afraid of. Still, as she looked out of her new living room window, the world outside looked much too scary to face. Having grown up on the West Coast her whole life, she was not prepared for how everything looked here. The warm, bright sun that she was so used to seeing out this time of year was nowhere to be seen. Everyone's accents seemed completely unfamiliar, and the people even seemed taller than normal. She decided to stay in the safety of her apartment that night and didn't go outside until it was time for her class the following afternoon. As the professor asked some basic questions to see what level everyone was at, Andrea's mind went completely blank. "Oh no," she thought to herself. "I'm not even supposed to be here. Everyone knows so much more than me." Just then, the professor pointed at her and asked her a question about the functions of the spinal cord. As frightened as she was, the answer was just blurted out of her mouth instinctively. "Impressive," says the teacher. "You'll do just great here," she assured her. As the teacher walked away, one of the pesky giant ants crawled across Andrea's desk. She quickly flicked it off the edge, and then smiled confidently. Making an appointment to see the dentist is usually one of the smartest decisions a person could make for his or her health. However, for Mayor Eck, booking his dentist appointment ended up being one of the worst mistakes in his life. This was because of the fact that the dentist Mayor Eck chose to visit was his ex-girlfriend whom he had recently broken up with to be with another woman. This silly mistake resulted in Mayor Eck walking out of the dentist's office with all the 32 teeth missing. "I didn't have any reason to doubt her," says Mayor Eck. "I mean, I thought she was a professional." Quite on the contrary, his ex-girlfriend decided that this was the perfect chance to get her revenge for having been heartbroken. She gave him a heavy dose of anesthesia, pulled out all of his teeth, and bandaged his whole face up with gauze so that her work wouldn't be noticed, until the bandages were all pulled off. "The bandages are to protect your gums," she told Mayor Eck, who then left the office, still heavily numbed by the effects of the anesthesia. As the anesthesia wore off on his way home, he could tell something was terribly wrong because he couldn't feel any teeth. One can only imagine the panic he must have felt after uncovering his ex's work under all the gauze. After reporting the event to the police, his ex is now facing the possibility of 3 years in prison for a doctor's malpractice suit. On the bright side for her, she might be spending those 3 years behind bars, pleased at knowing that her shocking stunt was very effective in terms of getting even with Mayor Eck. After seeing that he no longer had any teeth, his new girlfriend broke up with him. An 85-year-old woman in Tennessee named Astrid became a multimillionaire overnight after winning a $500 million lottery jackpot. However, her road to richness was not all completely smooth. Her story reminds us that in order to win the lottery, there are 2 crucial requirements. The first and most obvious necessity is a lot of luck. The second requirement is just as important, but much less often mentioned: getting organized. Astrid's story began when getting in line for a lottery ticket at her local supermarket. The woman ahead of her decided to let her cut in front of her to pay. This woman was also planning on buying a lottery ticket. Had she not given Astrid her spot in the line, the lottery money would have been hers. On the day that the winners were announced, Astrid realized she had won. She could not contain her excitement. She danced with joy all around her house, and jumped on the phone to tell her closest relatives what had just happened. The next morning Astrid woke up and prepared to go claim her prize money, but suddenly realized that she could not remember where she had placed her ticket. Given that her memory was no longer as sharp as it used to be, she searched and searched around her messy house for hours to no avail. She had absolutely no recollection of where she might have stored or dropped the ticket. Astrid had been given 30 days to claim her prize, or else it would be cancelled. For 27 days, her schedule was dedicated to searching every surface and square foot of her house for the missing ticket. With only 3 days left, she decided to finally call her daughters for help. She had been too embarrassed to call them from the beginning because her house was so messy, but now had no other choice. Figuring that helping their mother find the ticket would probably secure at least an extra $1 million to them, all 3 of Astrid's daughters immediately sped over to her house. Within the first half hour of searching, the youngest of her daughters hollered, "I found it." It turned out Astrid had left it in a dish cabinet. "Oh, thank you, daughter," Astrid cried. "I owe you so much." Her daughter's smile glistened with pride as her 2 sisters scowled at her from the next room. For most people, an ideal morning might consist of waking up to the warm sun creeping in through the bedroom window, along with the cheerful chirping of the birds from a nearby tree. Sadly, this is not the case for Michael, a part-time student that works late nights as a warehouse manager. Michael gets home around 2 o'clock a.m. every night, and heads straight to bed to get as much sleep as possible until his classes start at 10 o'clock a.m. However, for the past week, Michael has had a new alarm clock that he unfortunately has no control of. It is an energetic, loud, marking bird that has decided to make the tree outside of Michael's window his new home. Each morning, the bird begins singing as loud as possible at exactly 5:55 a.m., and does not stop until late into the night. Most city birds begin the day with sweet, gentle chirps that can barely even be heard indoors, but the sounds of marking birds are very distinct and consist of various noises that the marking bird hears and then imitates. This can include chirps from other birds, or even car alarms and school bells. After 1 week of losing sleep as a result of the bird noises, Michael decided to do something. "Go away," he screamed out his window. When that didn't work, he started throwing things at the tree to try to scare the bird away. This only made the bird get even louder. As a final resort, Michael phoned his local animal control and requested to get someone to remove the bird from the area. "We can't do that," replied the animal control specialist. Marking birds are a valued feature of North America's wildlife and are protected by many laws. You should consider yourself lucky to have one so close to home. Just enjoy the beautiful sounds of nature. Furious, Michael hung up the phone and threw himself on the couch, dozing off into the deepest sleep he had ever experienced all week. Only 5 minutes later he awoke to a thunderous caw coming from outside. On December 26, 2004, a 10-minute-long earthquake with a 9.3 magnitude occurred in the Indian Ocean. This massive earthquake, which is the 3rd strongest ever recorded in history, triggered various powerful tsunamis that reached over a dozen countries' shores. Nearly 230,000 people were killed by the catastrophe, and hundreds of thousands of others ended up injured or missing. In the midst of all the devastation caused by this disaster, many amazing and inspiring survival stories have emerged. One of the most extraordinary of these is the story of a young girl named Wati. The tsunami struck her hometown of Aceh when she was only 8 years old. Like so many others, the powerful waves separated her from her family, and she ended up being washed into an unknown town. After many years of searching for her, her family gave up, and assumed she had died after being swept away. Miraculously, Wati was returned to her parents 7 years later, at the age of 15. According to Wati, she had been adopted by a stranger who found her on the streets after the tsunami. Although the woman took her in to live with her, she forced Wati to beg on the streets and would often beat her if she did not make enough money. The girl had tried to find her family by asking for help from strangers, but did not remember the names of her parents, and could only vaguely remember that she had a grandfather named Ibrahim. Finally one day, a cab driver who heard Wati's story happened to know an old man with that name in a nearby town and decided to take her to him. Although the old man did not recognize her at first, he took Wati to see his daughter. "When I saw my mother, I knew it was her," said the 15-year-old. "I just knew." The parents were able to confirm that it really was their daughter based on a scar and birthmark on the girl's hip. This miraculous story is, unfortunately, one of the only confirmed reunions among families that were separated by the disaster. It was Saturday morning. Mary walked out of her house with $20 in her pocket and a spirit full of optimism. She had spent the previous night in front of her television set watching a reality show that followed lucky people who had found amazing things at their local thrift shops. All of these people had bought seemingly ordinary items for extremely low prices and ended up discovering that their items were actually very valuable treasures. After having spent 5 consecutive hours watching other people's experiences, Mary was determined to give bargain hunting a try in hopes of finding something that would make her rich. One of her favorite stories from the show was of a man who had purchased a copy of the Declaration of Independence thinking that it was a cheap replica for only $2. He ended up discovering that the print was actually one of only 200 official copies of the Declaration of Independence commissioned by John Quincy Adams in 1820. The man ended up making $477,650 after selling it. As Mary walked into her local thrift shop, she tried recalling what all the people in the reality show had looked for. The most common items that people got rich from were paintings and, so she headed straight to the home decorations aisle. Once there, she couldn't decide which looked most expensive. They actually all seemed pretty ugly to her. "Excuse me," Mary said to an elderly woman walking by. "Which painting do you think could make me richer?" Confused, the old lady quickly pointed at one and walked away. The painting the old lady had pointed at was of a cat collage with almost 20 different cat faces jumbled atop of one another. Definitely not my first choice, thought Mary. However, she trusted destiny's decision and bought the painting for $5. After putting it up online, she began receiving dozens of emails asking if the picture frame displayed came with the painting. In order to see what all the buzz about the frame was about, she took it to an antique store and asked if there was anything special about the frame. "Of course, it is special," remarked the clerk at the store. "Its wood and age make it at least $25,000. Mary ended up selling the frame for $30,000. A few days later, the buyer returned the ugly painting to her through the mail. Winter was approaching. Jason was excited for the coming season. It was his favorite time of a year. He loved the cold weather and snow. Jason lived in New York. During winter it would snow in New York. He always played in the snow, even as an adult. Jason would gather his family and friends at the park, where they had snowball fights. It was a lot of fun. His favorite holiday, Christmas, occurred in winter. This was another reason why winter was Jason's favorite season. Every year, he bought presents for his friends and family. Jason loved seeing the look on their faces when they unwrapped their Christmas presents. It was better to give than to receive, Jason thought. Jason loved everything about Christmas. He enjoyed caroling. He loved singing Christmas music. He loved kissing his wife under the mistletoe. He loved drinking sweeter eggnog. Jason sometimes even dressed up as Santa Claus for fun, and entertained his nephews. Winter also came at the end of a year. New Year's Day would come after Christmas. Jason also loved this holiday. It was a day to celebrate the new year to come, while reflecting on the past one. Jason always made New Year's resolutions. Every year he made a new resolution. This year he promised to go skydiving. Last year, he promised himself to lose 20 pounds. Jason always kept his New Year's resolution. He lost 20 pounds in 3 months. This year was no exception. He planned to sign up for skydiving lessons in January of next year. Jason could not stop thinking about winter. He could not wait for it to come. It was going to be the best winter yet. Jason needed to wait 5 more months because it was barely mid-July. For the past week, Elizabeth would come home from work and discover that her apartment smelled like cigarette smoke. She did not know where the smell was coming from. Elizabeth didn't smoke. No one else had the key to her apartment to smoke inside while she was at work. The smell of smoke especially bothered her because she had asthma. One day Elizabeth stayed home from work because she was expecting a package. When she woke up that morning, the apartment smelled fine. At 1 in the afternoon, Elizabeth went into the kitchen to make a sandwich for lunch. That was when she noticed the smell of cigarette smoke. She called the building superintendent. By the time he arrived at Elizabeth's apartment, the whole place smelled like cigarette smoke. The super told Elizabeth he was pretty sure the smoke was coming up through the vents from her new downstairs neighbor. The new neighbor was a smoker. The super told Elizabeth there was nothing to be done. The building was really old and the vents couldn't be sealed. It was also perfectly legal for the downstairs neighbor to smoke in his apartment. He suggested that Elizabeth buy an air filter and see if that would help. Elizabeth bought an air filter, but didn't find it to be enough. Her asthma was getting worse. Her clothes and furniture were beginning to smell like cigarette smoke, too. Elizabeth decided to go downstairs to talk to the neighbor. She was going to ask him not to smoke in his apartment. Elizabeth knocked on the door. When he opened the door, a huge wave of cigarette smoke came out. Elizabeth began coughing violently. The neighbor gave Elizabeth a disgusted look. "Are you trying to get me sick?" the neighbor asked her. Elizabeth couldn't believe what he was saying. "No, but you are," she said. Ron was excited to show his wife Debbie what he had bought at the home improvement store. Debbie, however, was not impressed when she saw the big, black plastic bin. She thought it was a garbage can. "We have a garbage can already. Why did you get another one?" Debbie asked. She seemed annoyed. Ron explained that it was not a garbage can. It was a compost bin. Ron explained that a compost bin was a place where they could put any organic waste, like fallen leaves, grass clippings, and fruit and vegetable peels. "Why can't we just throw that in the trash?" Debbie asked. She really didn't want extra work for herself. Ron explained that it was good for the environment. About 30% of all the garbage in the United States is made up of waste from food and yards. Not only would they produce less garbage, they would also make compost, which was rich soil. It would help Debbie's flowers. She could have the beautiful garden she always dreamed of. Ron explained that little by little inside the bin, the food scraps and green waste would create a pile. The pile would naturally break down. "Where are we keeping this pile?" Debbie asked. Ron said the bin would go in the backyard. Debbie wasn't convinced. She was worried about rats and roaches. Ron explained that as long as they didn't put any meat scraps or oily items in the compost bin, then rats wouldn't be a problem. Roaches, however, were a natural part of the materials breaking down. Ron was especially excited about what he bought to put in the compost bin. He pulled out a small box and gave it to Debbie. She opened it and screamed before dropping the box on the floor. The box was filled with worms. Jaime, a new immigrant, was attending his daughter's first performance in a school play. His daughter, Carol, was 5 years old. She was a kindergarten student at the local public school. Carol did not have a very big role in the school play. She was playing a rain cloud in a play about the drought in California. Carol had one line. Her line was, "I am sad enough to cry about how dry the state is." Jaime and his wife made sure to arrive early so that they could get a good seat in the auditorium. They secured seats in the front row. Before the show began, the school principal made an introductory speech. The speech was about how hard the students and teachers worked together to make the play possible. At the end of the speech, the principal said, "Let's give the school staff a hand." Jaime, whose English was not very good, stood up when the principal said this. He knew that when people said to give someone a hand, they meant they needed help. Jaime always wanted to help, especially at his daughter's school. Jaime thought maybe they needed help backstage. Jaime's wife put her arm in front of her husband. "Where are you going?" she whispered. "They need a hand," Jaime whispered back. His wife explained that to give someone a hand could also mean to applaud someone. "They don't need help. They just want us to clap," Jaime's wife said. Jaime felt a little embarrassed. He sat back down and began clapping along with the rest of the audience. Jaime thought to himself that someone needed to give the English language a hand. How could one phrase mean two different things? He meant the English language needed help. Donald had a rough morning. He had an argument with his wife, so he thought it would be a good idea to finish a 6-pack of beer and a handful of prescription pain pills. This would have been fine if he had stayed inside his house. Instead, drunk and high, Donald began to harass his next-door neighbor. First he banged on his neighbor's door. Then he broke the glass panel of a porch light. Finally he ripped the light's wires out of the wall. That was the last straw. The neighbor called the police. The police came and arrested Donald for public intoxication and disturbing the peace. Donald was taken to a nearby jail. His stay only lasted a few hours. As soon as he was more sober, the police released him. Apparently, Donald wasn't quite sober enough though. When he was released, Donald realized he was pretty far from his home. He didn't feel like walking almost 2 miles, so he called his friend from the jail to come get him. But Donald was getting impatient. When a woman got out of her car in the parking lot, he tried to get in. The woman screamed for help. Donald screamed, "But this is my car." The woman kept screaming, and Donald got out. He then thought it would be a good idea to take the bus home. A deputy was watching and arrested Donald again, after he had only been free for 1 hour. This time, however, Donald's jail stay would not be as short. He was charged with attempted burglary. A judge set his bail at $10,000. He didn't have $10,000, so he is still in jail awaiting trial. Rob Hernandez thought the fuzzy little chick at the pet shop was the cutest thing he had ever seen. He had to buy it. He thought he was buying a baby duck, and named his new pet Shaco. Shaco was loved and grew fast. Rob began to notice, however, that Shaco was growing too fast and getting too big. When Shaco made his first sound, Rob couldn't believe his ears. Rob expected a quack, but Shaco honked. Shaco was no duck. Shaco was a goose. Rob didn't reject Shaco though. He kept him as long as he could. Shaco was not a quiet goose. He made a lot of noise, honking day and night. Rob's neighbors started to complain. Rob didn't want to give Shaco up, but he couldn't risk his neighbors calling the police on him either. Rob had to make a decision. Rob decided to take Shaco to a nearby park that had a lake with other geese. Rob felt sad leaving Shaco, and he was pretty sure his feathered friend felt sad, too. Rob goes twice a week to the park to visit Shaco so that both the goose and the owner are less sad. When Rob goes to visit, Shaco swims across the lake right into Rob's arms. Sometimes, Shaco will even give Rob a little peck, a goose's way of giving a kiss. When Rob goes to visit, he always brings snacks for Shaco. The other geese seemed to be jealous of all the attention Shaco was getting, so now Rob brings enough bread for all the geese to share. Rob and Shaco also play. Rob throws his former pet into the lake. Shaco goes underwater, swims a little, and then returns to the shore so that Rob can throw him in again. Ever since Mary moved to the United States 1 year ago, she often heard the phrase no such thing as free lunch. While she understood this to mean that you can't get something for nothing, she heard other mothers at her child's school talking about the free lunch program. How much does it cost to enroll? Mary asked the secretary at her child's school. The secretary smiled and told Mary that it didn't cost anything except a little bit of time. In order to find out if Mary's child was qualified to get free lunch at school, she had to fill out a form. The form was available in many languages besides English. It asked Mary basic questions, like where she lived, how many children she had, and what her annual income was. Filling out the form was easy, and Mary didn't have to include proof of her income. She was worried though if the information on the form would be shared with other agencies. The secretary told her that the information was not shared. If Mary made below a certain amount annually, her child could get free lunch not just during the school year, but also even during the summer, when there was no school. Mary knew this would help her family. While Mary did work, she only worked part-time. Giving her child money for lunch every day did add up and impact the family budget. After filling out and submitting the form back to the school secretary, Mary had to wait a month or two before finding out if she was qualified. A few weeks after she submitted the form, a letter arrived in the mail. The letter informed her that her child was qualified. The letter also told her that her child could also get free breakfast in school. Tom noticed that every morning, when he went to school, his mother would give him a letter to drop in the mailbox on the corner. "Who are you writing to so much?" he asked. "I'm just trying my luck," Tom's mother told him. A few weeks after Tom started mailing out the letters, he noticed that his mother was getting a lot more mail. Some of the mail advertised on the envelope that she might already be a winner. His mother was also getting many more magazines. Some of the magazines were about things his mother didn't even care about, like cats. "Mom, why are you getting so many magazines?" Tom asked her. She told him that she had been entering contests, and that part of the process included subscribing to magazines. "It will increase my chances of winning the jackpot," she told him. Soon the family mailbox was filled with more contests, announcements, magazines, and bills. Tom's mother was surprised. She didn't think that checking off the boxes of magazines that looked interesting and affixing stickers to the return forms would cost her. She was spending more and more money and hadn't won anything. She wanted to be like the people in the commercials she saw on television. People bringing balloons and oversized checks surprised those people who entered the contests. Tom read the fine print. The magazines weren't free, and Tom's mother was not increasing her chances of winning anything by subscribing. Tom did some research and found out there had even been lawsuits against the companies running the contests and selling the magazine subscriptions. Tom's mother felt bad. "It pays to win, Mom, but you can't pay to win," Tom told her. Tom's mother wondered what she was going to do with all these magazines. Nancy Scott just turned 21 last October. She was excited about finally being able to go to concerts that were strictly 21 and over. She decided that she would go to Las Vegas for her first concert. Jennifer, Nancy's sister, decided to go along with her because she didn't want her sister to go alone and get lost. Jennifer called her friends Matt and Jake, and they all decided to make the drive to Las Vegas. As they arrived in Las Vegas, they parked their car in the parking lot of the hotel they were staying in. Nancy took a shower, and then Jennifer took one. They got dressed and then met both Matt and Jake in the lobby of the hotel. Nancy was so excited, she asked her sister if she wanted to get a drink. Jennifer agreed and said okay, but only one. Jennifer bought her sister a giant drink that came in a 4-foot tall cup, and she got the same. Nancy couldn't believe how big the drink was. "It's almost as tall as me," Nancy said. Jennifer laughed and took a drink from her cup. Matt and Jake arrived first at the place where the concert was going to be. They called the sisters and told them where to meet them. Nancy was excited to see the concert, because one of her favorite bands was playing. As they got in line to get in, Jennifer went to the restroom. When Jennifer was getting back to her friends and sister, she met one of the members of the band named Jill. Jennifer told Jill about Nancy coming all the way to Las Vegas to see this show, and if she could do something special for her. Jill smiled and said sure. She reached into her purse and gave Jennifer 4 backstage passes. Jennifer hugged Jill and said thank you. Jennifer ran back to Nancy and told her to close her eyes. When Jennifer told Nancy to open her eyes, she was holding up the backstage passes in front of Nancy. Nancy began jumping up and down with joy. James Baker was only 12 years old when his parents decided to move the family to a new town. At first James was heartbroken because he had to leave his friends behind. His mother told James that it would be okay and that he would make new friends. When James and his family finally arrived at their new home, they decided to go out to meet the neighbors. It was a typical American suburban neighborhood. Every house had a big lawn in the front with a walkway leading up to the door. James felt uncomfortable, and he didn't want to meet the neighbors. The first house they went to belonged to an elderly couple. They seemed nice, but they didn't have any kids that were James's age. The next house they visited had bicycles parked by the garage door, so James thought kids of his age might live there. James knocked on the door, and a young girl named Linda answered. James became nervous, and he let his mother do the talking. Linda's parents weren't home, but she told James's mother that they would go visit when they got home. Linda smiled at James, said goodbye, and closed the door. As they were walking back to their house next door, James looked back and noticed Linda was looking at him through the window. James looked at her, and Linda smiled. When they got home, James went to his new room. He took a look outside his window and noticed that he could see Linda in her room. He couldn't help looking at her. He thought she was the prettiest girl he had ever seen. As James was looking at her, he heard his mother calling. "I'll go downstairs in a moment, Mom," James said as he turned away from the window. When James looked back to Linda, she was staring right at him. James fell down to the floor and said in a whisper, "Oh, no, I hope she didn't see me. Oh, please, please." Linda saw him and laughed. She thought James was cute. "My best friend's name is Joseph Taylor, but he prefers to be called Joe. He does a lot of stupid stuff, and it usually gets him in trouble. The other day, while he was trying to impress some girls, he fell off his skateboard and broke his arm. Joe had to get his arm in a cast, but he told me it was worth it. He had already gotten 3 phone numbers from the girls he was trying to impress. I always love Joe coming over to my house, because it makes my day more exciting." After he showed me his arm, Joe asked me if I wanted to go to the mall. "Sure, why not?" I said. I asked my mom for permission, and she said yes. When we got to the mall, Joe wanted to get something to eat, so we went to McDonald's. We got 2 hamburgers and 2 sodas, and then we went walking around the mall. For some reason, Joe always liked stealing things from the stores at the mall. I never understood why he stole the things he did. For example, that day he stole 3 keychains, 5 pairs of socks, and a t-shirt of a television show that he had never heard of. Joe always said the same thing when he got out of the store: "I love the rush of stealing." I always looked at him, shook my head, and called him an idiot. The worst was yet to come. When we were leaving the mall to go catch the bus, a security guard grabbed Joe and me by the shoulders and told us we couldn't leave. The security guard took us to his office and called our parents. I was worried because I knew my dad would yell at me. Joe, on the other hand, was laughing and was telling me jokes. When our parents showed up to pick us up, Joe looked at me, smiling, and said, "See you in a couple of months." I looked at him, shook my head, and called him an idiot. Michael Hall always loved playing basketball with his brother Scott. They lived next to a park, and they went to play basketball at the park every day. Michael was a junior at his college, and Scott was a freshman. They both tried out for the college team, but were so nervous during the tryouts that they didn't make it. One day, while they were playing basketball, Michael noticed that a guy was watching them play. When Michael and Scott finished playing, the guy who was watching them went up to Michael. "You guys have some skills," the guy said. Michael finally realized who the man was. It was Charles King, a famous basketball player. Charles told them that he used to play basketball at that park too when he was younger. Charles asked them if they played for school, or if they had a team with friends. They said they didn't make it into their school's team. "I never made it into my school's basketball team either," Charles said. Charles asked the brothers if they wanted to play a game of 2-on-1. They happily said yes. Charles won, of course, but he told the brothers that they were really good. Charles then told the brothers that he was starting a basketball camp at his old high school, and if they were interested, they could join it for free. The brothers had heard about it, and said that they would love to join. "We just have to ask our mother," Scott said. Charles laughed, and said, "Of course, you don't want to get Mom mad." The 2 brothers ran back home, and they told their mom about what had happened at the park. She told them that they could join as long as they kept up with their homework and their classes. The brothers agreed, and went back to the park to practice. Robert Lee and his brothers were excited about the new Godzilla movie that was coming out. The day the movie came out, Robert and his brothers went to the theater early. Robert's brothers wanted to see another movie first, and then they wanted to sneak into Godzilla. Robert didn't mind, because he liked going to the movies. When they got to the theater, Robert bought his brothers popcorn, soda, and some candy. When they got everything, they went to find their seats. Robert's brothers didn't really like the first movie they watched, but they were excited to see Godzilla. When they got out of the first movie, Robert went to get more soda and popcorn, because his brothers had finished all of it. Robert's brothers snuck into the theater, and they were waiting for Robert to come back with the snacks. When Robert tried to go back in to see Godzilla, a security guard asked him for his ticket. Robert didn't have one for Godzilla, so the security guard had to kick him out. Robert had to go outside and buy another ticket for Godzilla. He felt embarrassed, because he had to stand in the line with the popcorn and soda. The people in line and the people who worked in the ticket booth looked at Robert and found him funny. Robert knew that they were looking at him, because they knew he got kicked out for trying to sneak into another movie. His face turned red. He thought about calling his brothers to get out, so that they could go home. Robert thought about how his brothers wanted to see the movie too, and so he bought the ticket and went back in. The security guard looked at him again, and asked him for his ticket. Robert showed it to him, and went into the theater. The security guard laughed. It was a hot day in Clarksville. The children in the neighborhood were sweating, and wanted to do something refreshing. The pool was closed because they were building something new in it. They thought about what they could do to escape the heat, but they never could agree on doing the same thing. That's when Christopher Baker decided to go to the store. He bought 10 bags of balloons, and went to his house to fill them up with water. He invited his two best friends Joseph and Patrick to help him out. By the time they finished, they had 5 buckets of water balloons. They went outside with the buckets, put them in the center of Joseph's lawn, and started throwing them to the children in the neighborhood. At first, the other children were surprised, but then they wanted to get wetter. They all went to the store and bought some balloons for themselves. Christopher and his friends went back into the house to make more balloons. When they get back outside, they got attacked with 10 different water balloons. Christopher and his friends started laughing. When they realized where the other boys were, they decided to hide. Christopher gave the orders to his friends. He told Joseph to hide behind his dad's car. He told Patrick to hide behind his mom's car. They each took 4 water balloons with them. Christopher told them to wait for his signal, and then they could throw the balloons. Christopher knew where 3 of the boys were hiding, so he went running, and attacked them with 5 water balloons. Christopher then ran back to the place where he was hiding, but the boys were coming after him. Christopher yelled out, "Now!" Joseph and Patrick came out of hiding and attacked the boys with their water balloons. The boys went back. Christopher and his friends started laughing. It was the beginning of summer. David Lopez's dad wanted him to get a summer job. David had just finished school and was looking forward to enjoying his time off school. He wanted to sleep late, he wanted to play video games, and he wanted to spend time with his friends. David's dad decided that he would get a job for David. When he came home, he handed David a uniform for the Burger Hut. David was sad because he didn't want to work at the Burger Hut. He knew all of his friends went there, and he knew that his friends would make fun of him. David knew that his dad was able to get him this job because the owner was his dad's friend. The owner's name is Michael. David didn't really like him that much. David had the first day at work. Everyone that worked at the Burger Hut had to wear a hat. David's hat fell into the oil where they made the fries. Michael had to get it out with a big spoon. After a week had passed by, David seemed to be getting used to working at the Burger Hut. Michael was impressed with how hard David worked, and told him he could take a day off. During his day off, David went out with his friends. They went to the park and played some basketball, and then his friends decided to go get something to eat. David asked them where they wanted to go. They said they wanted to go eat at the Burger Hut. David tried to convince them to go somewhere else, but his friends really wanted to go to the Burger Hut. When they got to the Burger Hut, David put on his sweater and his hat. He sat down in the far corner of the restaurant, and tried to hide himself from his co-workers and his boss. When his friends got their food, they went to sit down with David. Michael came out and saw David. He went up to him and said, "You just can't get enough of this place, huh, David?" Michael chuckled and then left. David's friends took a bite out of their burgers, and looked at David. "You work here?" One of David's friends asked. His another friend looked at him and said, "Can you get me a job?" David smiled and nervously said, "I'll try." It's been 6 months since Jason White's parents were officially divorced. At first Jason was sad. He thought that it was his fault that his parents had gotten divorced. One day, while Jason was at his dad's new apartment, he asked his dad a question. "Why did you get divorced with Mom, Dad?" Jason asked. His dad didn't want to talk about it. He told Jason that he would understand when he was older. The following day, Jason went back home with his mother. During the car ride, he asked his mother the same question. "Why did you get divorced with Dad, Mom?" Jason asked. She told Jason the same thing his father had told him. Jason didn't understand why they couldn't tell him the reason. He was 10 years old, but he felt like he was still 6. A week had passed since Jason asked his parents the question. Things weren't looking great for his parents. His mom would cry, and his dad would always be mad. Jason began getting angry with his parents. One day, after school, Jason decided to go over to his friend Matt's house. He asked Matt if he could sleep over for a couple of days. Matt said yes, so Jason went to get some clothes from his house before his mom got home. Jason got back to Matt's house. He told Matt not to tell Matt's mom and his mom that he was staying there. He didn't want anyone to know that he was there. Matt agreed. At around midnight, Jason's mom called Matt's mom to ask if Jason had stopped by. As Matt didn't tell his mom, so his mom said no. The following day, Jason saw that the police were looking for him. His mother and father had called the police. Matt began to get worried because he didn't want to lie to the police. He called Jason's parents and told them that Jason was at his house. When Jason's parents arrived at Matt's house, Jason wanted to leave through the window. Matt told him that his parents were worried sick and that he had to go back. His parents came into Matt's room and saw Jason. They ran to him and hugged him. Jason's dad turned to his ex-wife and gave her a big hug and a kiss. Jason felt happy, but confused. Karen and Betty Robinson were out celebrating their birthdays. They were identical twins and had just turned 30. They went out to a baseball game with a couple of friends. They all bought themselves beer, and each drank 8 beers. Karen couldn't drink as much as Betty could, so she had gotten drunk by the 5th beer. Karen and Betty knew that they were going to be drinking, so they decided to take the bus to the game. Their friends all came on the bus as well. When it was time to go home, Karen and Betty got back on the bus with their friends. They got to Union Station, and got off to catch their train home. They said bye to their friends, and went to catch the train. People looked at them weird, because they could tell that they were drunk. When they were on the train, Karen began to feel sick. Betty looked at her, and started to laugh. Karen started to vomit, but she stopped herself. She got out of the train, and went running to the bathroom to finish vomiting. When they got home, Betty told Karen to drink another beer to calm her stomach. Karen agreed and drank it. It calmed her down, and then she fell asleep. The next day, Karen and Betty woke up sick. They couldn't believe how drunk they had gotten. They both felt terrible. Their stomachs hurt, their heads hurt, they both felt dizzy. When Betty got to work, she found a closet and fell asleep. When Karen got to work, she went to the restroom and threw up. When they both got out of work, they promised themselves that they wouldn't drink like that ever again. When Christopher Lee was a young man, he had a dream to become an English professor. He worked hard at this by first going to a community college after high school before transferring to the University of California, Los Angeles. At UCLA, Chris earned his bachelor's degree in English, but he still needed his master's degree to teach at college. Chris met George while taking a class at his old community college. George was a news reporter, who told Chris how much he enjoyed his job. Chris became very interested in his story. It turned out George was also an English major, but he turned to journalism because he wanted to be published. George said to Chris one day, "Chris, I've known lots of English majors who want to be published, but never got that chance. In journalism, you can get published, and get published often." Chris thought about his words, and asked him how he became a journalist. George laughed and said, "Start with journalism 101. Chris took his advice, and soon he fell in love with writing in journalism style. Its short, precise method of writing appealed to Chris. Journalists deal only in facts. It is not like English writing. You don't paint pictures in journalism, you report facts. There is a measure of creativity involved with writing in a journalistic style, but it is unlike English." Soon, Chris earned his certificate, and went on to earn his master's degree in journalism. He now works for a large, daily newspaper. He is very grateful to his old friend George, who introduced him to journalism. He has now been published more than 200 times. George changed the course of Christopher's life. Richard grew up in Los Angeles, California, and had a pretty good life. There was food on the table, and he had plenty of clothes to wear. He didn't really have any needs. He went to a good school in a nice area of the city, and had many friends. Richard grew up with 3 older sisters, who also enjoyed their life in California, and had many friends. All this was possible because of their father Michael. Michael was born into poverty in a small town, just outside of Mexico City. When Michael was a boy, he remembered times when there was not enough food to eat, or fresh water to drink. Whenever he was thirsty, he would go to the river to collect water. Michael lived in a hut that had no floor. Many times he slept on the dirt, with just a blanket between him and the ground. That all changed when, at the age of 17, Michael emigrated to the United States with his family. The first few years were almost as difficult as it was in Mexico, but gradually things began getting better for Michael and his family. When Michael turned 19, he decided to enroll into a community college. His father had always stressed the importance of learning English while they lived in Mexico. That talent was very useful to Michael now. Soon Michael was bringing home excellent report cards. Because of this, he was able to transfer to a university and earned his degree in engineering. Michael got a great job that paid well, which allowed him to move into a better part of town, and to help his parents, too. He soon had a family of his own. When Richard was born, it was the happiest day in Michael's life. As a bartender at one of Los Angeles' busiest clubs, Daniel King often saw a lot of weird stuff. During the last party he worked, he saw 5 people throwing up on the dance floor, 2 fights, and a girl losing her top in front of everyone. The weirdest thing that ever happened to Daniel was when a drunken girl asked him to dance. He denied at first, but when she came back for another drink, she dragged him to the dance floor. Girls had dragged Daniel to the dance floor before, but this time was different. The girls that dragged him out before actually knew how to dance, but this girl did not and was drunk. She kept jumping up and down, shaking her body and looking at Daniel straight in the eyes. She was so drunk that she kept bumping into the other people that were dancing. As the music played, the girl kept jumping and dancing. She kept yelling to Daniel that she had to go to the restroom, but he couldn't hear her. She yelled at Daniel once more, and that's when it happened. She had an accident on the dance floor. Some of her urine actually got on Daniel's shoes. After it happened, the girl was so embarrassed that she ran out of the club crying. Daniel couldn't believe what had happened. He told people to move out of the way, while his friend came over to clean up the dance floor. The weird thing about that incident was that the girl came back the next day, looking for her cell phone, but she didn't remember Daniel. Daniel wanted to go hide, because he thought she would recognize him, but she didn't. Daniel decided that he would never go out to dance with another girl, while he was working. You're a winner. That's what Helen Green read as she opened an envelope she got in the mail. She couldn't believe it. She had won. Helen's husband Roger came over to see why Helen was screaming and jumping. Helen told Roger, "You're not going to believe it. Your sister entered us in a sweepstakes for a Hawaii vacation, and we won. We won, Roger." Roger didn't believe it at first, but then he researched it. "Well, I guess we're going to Hawaii, honey," he told Helen. They both started jumping with joy. Helen and Roger arrived at Hawaii, and couldn't believe how beautiful everything looked. They had been married for 20 years, but had never had a vacation. After they had checked into their hotel room, they decided to go to the beach. They met a surfer named William, although he liked to be called Will, who was offering free lessons. Seeing that Roger had always wanted to learn how to surf, they decided to go. Will explained to Roger how to paddle the surfboard, and he taught him how to stand up on it. After 2 hours of training in the sand, Will told Roger that they would go out to the water. Roger didn't like that. "Where are we going?" Roger nervously asked. "Over there," said Will, as he pointed to the ocean. He started getting nervous, and started breathing heavy. Helen went over to Roger and calmed him down. "They're probably in their honeymoon," people said as they passed Roger and Helen. Roger laughed. He finally calmed down. He went out to the ocean with Will, and tried to surf. Every time he tried to get on the surfboard he ended up falling. When they got back to the land, Helen hugged Roger and kissed him. "You did great, honey. I love you," Helen said. Roger knew she was lying, but he had never seen Helen smile so greatly. He let it go. Paul Martin didn't like going to his family reunion. He didn't know most of them, and he didn't even like the people he did know. Paul had always been a loner. He liked doing things alone. He went to the movies alone. He went to concerts alone. He liked to go eat alone. So, at the family reunion, it was no surprise to see that Paul was sitting alone at a table where no one was sitting at. Occasionally, an aunt or uncle of his would come up to say hello, but none of his cousins ever said hello to him. Paul was fine with it. He didn't care, because he didn't like talking to them, either. During his last family reunion, Paul decided to play a trick on his cousins. His cousins had been playing Nintendo in his uncle's room. Paul knew how to turn off all the power in the house. He locked the door to his uncle's room, and then went to turn off the power. When all the lights turned off, he could hear his cousins begin to yell. They were upset because the game was going really well. When his cousins tried to leave, they realized that the door was locked. They began to yell for help, and Paul started laughing. All of his aunts and uncles were outside enjoying the party, so no one could hear the yells. Paul went back outside and sat down at a table. He was still laughing. An hour passed, and his aunt started looking for her son. When Paul's cousins were finally set free from the room, they started looking for Paul, because they knew he had locked them in there. Paul wasn't worried. He knew they wouldn't do anything. He looked at them, laughed, and then went back to listen to music. The cousins sat down, and got something to eat. They were all mad at Paul. "It was Sunday, the last time I saw my dog. His name is Spot, because his whole body is covered with spots. He is a good dog. He never bites, and almost never barks. I got Spot when I was around 9 years old. All of my friends knew that Spot was like my best friend. So, when I told everyone that Spot had gotten lost, they all came out trying to help out. We looked for hours. My dad told me that maybe Spot got picked up by a dog catcher. If that was true, then he would be at the dog pound, which is where they send all the dogs that get lost. My friend Mark told me that they put pictures of all the dogs they find in the streets online, so I went online to try. I spent more than an hour checking the online pictures of the dogs, and finally found my Spot. I started jumping with joy. I went with my mom and dad to pick up Spot. When we got there, he started barking and running in circles all around his cage. I knew he was happy to see us. He had been lost for about 2 weeks. When we got him home, he ran around the backyard and ran directly into his little house my dad and I built for him. He started barking really loudly, which is weird for Spot. As soon as my sister heard Spot, she came running out to try and catch him. He ran around her and then let himself be captured. I think he just wanted to be petted. I knew he was happy to be back home and even happier when I brought out his food. I hope Spot never gets lost again. Edward Allen always hated living in Los Angeles. Everything was too expensive, traffic was always bad, people were not friendly, it was always crowded. Edward never wanted to live in a big city. He always wanted to live somewhere in the country, in a small town, where everyone knew everyone. It was a dream that he was dedicated to achieving. The day after his 26th birthday, he called his friend Lisa, who had moved to a small town in Iowa. He asked her how it was like over there. She told him that he would love it. It's quiet and peaceful, people are friendly. Edward made up his mind, he was going to move to this little town. He sat down with his mom and dad, and told them what he was planning on doing. They supported his decision and helped him pack his things. He would leave in a week. Lisa had helped Edward get a job where she worked, and she told Edward he could stay with her and her roommate until he got back on his feet. Edward was grateful. When he showed up, he immediately started working. He liked his job, but he found it a bit boring at times. He was a waiter at a cafe. He liked the pie at the restaurant, so it wasn't all bad. After he had been working for 2 months, he told Lisa that he couldn't handle it anymore. He wanted to go back to the city. Lisa laughed and said, "You have always hated the city, but now you're running back to it." "I don't get you, Edward." Edward didn't think living in a small town would be so boring. "The boredom alone will drive me insane, Lisa," Edward said as he started packing his things. Donald Turner wanted to get a job. He had graduated from his university with a bachelor's degree in business administration. Since his graduation, he had applied for 20 jobs, yet no one had called him back. Donald decided to be an accountant 2 years ago, because he figured that it would be an easier way to earn money. Although Donald had studied to become an accountant, his real passion was painting. Donald took summer classes at his university. His teacher told him that he had the talent, but needed to commit more to his painting. Even though Donald was interested, he decided to play it safe and focus his study on becoming an accountant. He passed his classes as well as his business classes, all with A's. He was proud of his grades. However, 2 years had passed, Donald still could not find a job. He began getting frustrated. In order to calm himself down, Donald began painting. He would go to apply for jobs in the morning, and then come back home and paint. When Donald began feeling really stressed out, he would go out to the park and paint there. One day, when Donald was painting at the park, a man began watching him paint. Donald didn't see the man the whole time he was there. When Donald finished the painting, the man went to talk to him. "You have some real talent," the man said. Donald chuckled and said thanks. The man wanted to know if Donald was selling the painting. Donald was surprised. He didn't think anyone would want to buy his paintings. Donald said yes, and the man offered him $1,500 for the painting. Donald almost dropped the painting because he couldn't believe it. After Donald sold the painting, he bought us supplies with the money he received. He decided to forget about being an accountant. He had never felt so happy. For the past month, Mark King had been receiving flyers in the mail about a new superstore that was opening up in his neighborhood. The flyers confused him. He had never heard the term superstore before. Later on, he found out that a superstore is a large retail store that sells a variety of products, usually at discount prices. Sometimes superstores are also called big box stores. Many times they are chain stores owned by one company. The flyers all had different messages about the superstore opening. One set of flyers invited him and others to apply for jobs at the store. The jobs paid well and even offered some benefits. Mark thought this was a good thing since he knew many people were looking for work. Another set of flyers included coupons to be used on opening day. The store had many bargains for common items like paper towels, but also for big screen televisions. Mark thought this too was a good thing. It seemed like a good idea to be able to get a variety of things in one place instead of going from one store to another. It would save time and money. Superstores could sell groceries and clothes under one roof. Another set of flyers contradicted the positive messages about the superstore though. Some local residents were organizing a protest of the superstore. The flyers said that the superstore was bad for the community because it threatened the business of smaller stores in the area. Mark thought about Mr. Hernandez, who owned a small grocery store down the block. That was where Mark bought staple food items like eggs and milk. He didn't want Mr. Hernandez's store to be closed, but he also wanted to save money. Getting a driving license is very important for a 16-year-old. Today was my 16th birthday, and my dad promised to take me to the Department of Motor Vehicles to do my driving test. I passed my written test already, so it was for a road test today. When we got to DMV, I began to get really nervous. I was driving my dad's car, and I didn't want to mess up and crash. My dad looked at me and told me that everything would be fine. I had stayed up all night thinking about how it would go, and if I would pass the test. When the driver instructor came out, he told me to get in the car and turn on the lights. I did as I was told. He then told me to turn on the left turn signal, and then the right turn signal. They both worked, so it was time to start driving. The instructor had dark sunglasses on, and he didn't say much when we got in the car. The instructor gave me directions to go straight and make a right turn at the next stop sign, which was a couple of blocks away. I did as I was told, and then kept going straight. Then the instructor told me to keep going straight until I reached a street called Marengo, and then to turn left. As I drove, I kept looking for Marengo Street, and thought I might pass it and the instructor would deduct points from my test. When I finally found Marengo Street, I turned to tell the instructor. That was when I realized that he was asleep. I couldn't believe it. This was an important event in my life, an event that I had been worried about for months. When we finished, he woke up and told me I had done a good job, and that I would be getting my license in about a month. I laughed and thanked him. I went to tell my dad the good news. Ruth Campbell had never gone to Disneyland as a child. She was now 40 years old with 2 children, a boy and girl. The boy's name was Jeff and the girl's name was Carol. When Jeff was 11 and Carol was 13, Ruth decided to take her kids to Disneyland, which would be the first time any of them ever went. When they arrived at Disneyland, Ruth explained to her children that if they got split up, they would meet at the front of the park. The first thing Ruth did when they got inside was looking for Mickey Mouse. She wanted to take pictures with all the characters at Disneyland. She even made a list of the characters she wanted to take pictures with. Her children looked at her and smiled. They saw that their mom was acting like a little girl again. She was giggling every time she took a picture with a character. Her favorite Disney character was Donald Duck, so she kept an eye open for him. When they were in line for a ride, she saw that Donald was taking pictures with people by a restaurant. She told her children, "Look, guys, it's Donald. Hopefully, he is still there when we get out." When they got out of the ride, Donald wasn't there anymore. Ruth told her children that it was okay, and that they would bump into him later on. They enjoyed their day at Disneyland until it was time for the park to close. Ruth and her children were looking at the fireworks that they put on every night at Disneyland. She hugged her children and told them she loved them. They hugged her back and continued to watch the show. When they were leaving the park, her children noticed that Donald was taking photos with some other people, and their mom hadn't noticed him yet. Carol told her mom that she needed to go to the restroom, and asked her mom to wait for her for a moment. While she was waiting for Carol to come back from the restroom, Ruth felt someone poke her on her shoulder. It was Donald Duck with Carol. Ruth began tearing up a bit, and hugged both of them. They all took photos with Donald Duck, the last character on Ruth's list. 3 men once lived in a small town in Texas. One was a musician, another was an artist, and the other was a poor homeless man. One day the artist was going to start working on a new sculpture, but didn't have the necessary tools to start. He went downtown and saw a poor homeless man. Because the artist was new in town and got lost, he asked the homeless man where the nearest art supply store was. The homeless man told him that it was the red and white building around the corner. The artist looked at him and said thank you. He gave the homeless man a $10 bill with the words "Pass it forward" written on the bill. The homeless man took the money and said, "God bless you." A few hours had passed, and the homeless man started getting hungry. He walked around in town, and saw a young musician playing outside a cafe. The homeless man sat down and started listening to the music played by the musician. A waiter from the cafe came out and told the homeless man that he had to leave, because he wasn't buying anything, and other people wanted to sit down and enjoy the music. The musician saw this and told the waiter to leave him alone and that he would like to buy the homeless man something to eat. The waiter looked at the musician and said okay. The homeless man thanked the musician. After he finished eating, he took out the $10 bill and gave it to the musician. The homeless man left. After the musician had finished playing at the cafe, he decided to go to a local art festival with his girlfriend. As they were walking around and looking at all the different paintings and sculptures, the musician's girlfriend saw a sculpture she liked. It was a young man helping out an older man who had fallen down. She wanted to buy it, but didn't have enough money. The musician told her not to worry. He pulled out $10 and gave it to the artist. As the musician and his girlfriend walked away, the artist looked at the $10 bill and smiled. "Well, look at that, you found your way back home," said the artist. Maria Gonzalez didn't like how technology was slowly taking over everyone's life. She always took the bus to school. Whenever she got on the bus, she would notice that more than half of the people were staring down at their phones. Fewer people were having actual conversations with each other. She felt bad. She thought that this was the reason why people had trouble relating to people in the real world. Everyone was living online now. Maria had trouble making new friends because she hated being on social media, websites like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. She rarely met new people. She tried going up to people on the bus and starting a conversation, but they always looked at her weirdly. She felt like she was an outsider, and the only one that was not caught in the internet's web of lies. One day, while Maria was walking in the park, she saw a girl walking through the park. The girl wore a long, colorful dress, and was always smiling. Maria wanted to talk to this girl. She walked up to the girl and said hello. At first the girl was startled, because she didn't see Maria coming, but then she smiled and said, "Hello, do we know each other?" Maria shook her head and said no. Maria asked her if she wanted to hang out and talk. The girl said sure. Maria and the girl talked for hours. They talked about everything: music, boys, family, food, and their shared distrust of technology. Maria had done something she hadn't done since she was a young girl. She made a new friend in the real world. Disneyland is also called Magic Kingdom. It is located in Anaheim, California. The park opened in 1955 and was an instant success. When Anthony Martinez was a little boy, his brothers and sisters told him about Disneyland. At first, Anthony didn't know what they meant. He was just too young, and would call it Disneyland as he couldn't pronounce it properly. His father had taken his older siblings to the park many times, but that was years ago. Anthony was much younger than his brothers and sisters. For a long time, Anthony kept asking his parents to take him to Disneyland, but the feeling eventually wore off. He quit bugging his parents to take him. One day, when Anthony was about 8 years old, a classmate came to school bragging about his weekend at Disneyland. All of a sudden, Anthony wanted to go again. "Please, Mommy, take me to Disneyland," Anthony pleaded to his mom. His dad heard it, and immediately told him, "Okay, son, we're going this weekend for sure." Anthony's dad hadn't realized that his youngest child had never been there, and felt very bad about it. The weekend came, and Anthony was so excited. He couldn't keep still. When they got into Disneyland, Anthony marveled at the castles and other attractions. He especially liked the life-sized characters that roamed the park. He grew up watching Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Now he was taking pictures with them. Anthony was in heaven. The best part of the theme park is the rides. Can we go on the Captain Nemo ride? That question was soon followed by, can we go on the Matterhorn? Soon Anthony had gone on just about every ride. He was overwhelmed by the place. Soon the family was back in their SUV, heading back home with Anthony fast asleep. It was the greatest day of his young life. A day he would later call the best day of my life. A loud boom woke her up. She looked at the clock next to her bed. It was midnight. What was that? She asked her husband, who hadn't been woken up by the sound, so Betty shook him. Another loud boom followed. Then there was a crackling sound. "Oh, that's just fireworks," Betty's husband said. It wasn't the 4th of July, the most common day to hear fireworks. It was just a normal Thursday night in the middle of June. Why would there be fireworks now? Betty asked. Betty and her husband just moved into a new house after their wedding. This was the neighborhood her husband grew up in. He said it was common for people to start setting off fireworks in the summer, even before the Independence Day holiday. "The whole summer is a reason for fireworks here," Betty's husband told her. He said that even when it wasn't summer, people set off fireworks for whatever they were celebrating. "Maybe someone is having a graduation party or a birthday," Betty's husband told her. He said that sometimes people set off fireworks, even when a local sports team won a game. Betty wondered how that was legal. She thought fireworks were illegal to buy and use. Betty's husband told her that it was easy enough for people to buy fireworks. He also told her that different counties in the state had different laws, so people could buy fireworks in one county and use them in a different county, like where they lived. Also, people can legally set off fireworks for holidays besides the 4th of July, like for Lunar New Year, he added. Betty tried to go back to sleep, but the loud booms and crackles kept going. She decided to get a glass of water and go out into the yard to see the fireworks. Patricia was happy that she was finally making friends since moving to Los Angeles from New York. She had left everything behind to move to be closer to her boyfriend. The first friend she made was Helen. Helen worked with Patricia at a clothing store in the local shopping mall. Sometimes Patricia would even see Helen on the freeway when they were working the same shift. Patricia thought that they must not live too far from one another. Helen confirmed this. My neighborhood is right next to yours, Helen told Patricia while they were both checking out customers. Drop by any time you want on a day when we're both not working, Helen said. Patricia took the invitation too literally. She was able to get Helen's address from their manager at work. I want to surprise my new friend, Patricia told the manager. The manager thought that was sweet, and without thinking about Helen's privacy, he passed the address on to Patricia. On a day that Patricia and Helen both had the day off, Patricia looked up Helen's address on her map application on her cell phone. Helen's house was only 10 minutes away. Patricia followed the directions, and at 9 o'clock a.m., she rang the doorbell at 2374 Evergreen Avenue. It took Helen a while to answer the door. She looked genuinely surprised, but also confused when she saw Patricia on her doorstep. What are you doing here? How did you get my address? Helen asked. She was still in her pajamas and her hair was a mess. You told me to drop by any time we both had a day off, so I got your address from our manager. I want to give you a surprise. Patricia said. I was just being polite. You can't just show up at someone's house. Helen said before slamming the door on Patricia's face. Julie was tired of living with her parents. She was 22, and just finished college. She started a new job, in an office, and didn't want her parents to tell her what to do anymore, so Julie decided to start looking for an apartment. She started by looking at classified ads in the newspaper and checking on websites like Craigslist. The first apartment she went to see sounded perfect on the newspaper. It was advertised as a cozy one-bedroom apartment with a view. She made an appointment to view the apartment. When the landlord opened the door, Julie was sorely disappointed. The cozy bedroom barely fit a twin mattress and a nightstand. The window actually offered a view of a brick wall. Julie didn't give up hope though. The next apartment she saw was advertised as having a renovated kitchen. Since Julie loved to cook, she imagined herself cooking gourmet meals on shiny new kitchen appliances. However, the broker showing Julie around explained that the only renovations were new knobs on old wooden cabinets. Julie was beginning to lose hope. She then saw a listing for a basement apartment with access to a low-maintenance yard. Julie imagined herself hosting barbecues for her friends until she saw that the low-maintenance yard was a tiny slab on concrete. Julie decided to stop looking for apartments that had features she liked. Instead, she was going to look for an apartment close to her job. She read a listing for a studio that was close to a freeway. This meant a shorter commute. When she saw the place, she found that the studio actually overlooked the freeway, and traffic could be heard from the bedroom. Julie was discouraged. She decided not to move out yet. It was Laura's first Halloween in the United States. She had seen many portrayals of the late October holiday on television and in movies. She had to admit she was a little excited and nervous about the day. She was excited to see the costumes worn by kids. Ringing her doorbell, she was also worried about being scared by the costumes. She had watched too many horror movies. Laura was renting a room in a house. Her landlady asked her if she could help with the candy. Laura happily agreed. The sun was just starting to set when the first group of kids in costumes rang the doorbell. Trick or treat, they said enthusiastically when Laura opened the door. The kids all had open bags. I want a treat, Laura said and grabbed the candy from each of the bag. The landlady came running to the door. No, Laura, you give the kids candy, not taking from them, she explained gently. Thankfully, none of the kids were upset. They just looked confused. The landlady suggested that Laura should go out with some friends to a local community Halloween carnival. She would handle giving out the candy by herself. Laura went to her room to put on her witch costume. She walked to the local recreation center, along with Joe and some other friends. The recreation center was decorated with fake spider webs and filled with artificial fog. We're going to egg some houses, Joe told her. She didn't know that throwing eggs was illegal. She just thought it was another Halloween tradition. A few hours later, the landlady opened the door and found Laura accompanied by police. Trick or treat, Laura asked, looking embarrassed. Sharon and Ken just finished a wonderful meal at a fancy restaurant. The service and food were 5-star quality. Ken asked for the check. How much is the tip? Sharon asked. Since she and Ken were just friends, she didn't want him to pay for the whole meal, but since Ken did invite her, she assumed he was paying. Sharon thought that offering to put in the tip was a nice gesture. The tip was not going to be cheap. The meal, complete with a bottle of wine, must have been at least $200. $30 would be 15% of a $200 bill, and $40 would be 20% of a $200 check. Since the service was good, Sharon had no problem giving a 20% tip. Ken told Sharon that there was no need to leave a tip. Sharon was shocked. Maybe Ken didn't think the food was good, or maybe he wasn't happy with the service. This surprised Sharon because Ken seemed to enjoy the entire experience and didn't complain. Was something wrong? Sharon asked Ken. No, Ken answered. He explained that he felt tipping was just an American way of showing off extra wealth. I think it's vulgar and disrespectful, he continued. Sharon knew that Ken wasn't born in the United States and wondered if that had something to do with how Ken felt. Well, in the United States, tipping is kind of expected. Servers generally aren't paid that well and rely on tips to feed their families. The exception, of course, is if the service was really bad, but I had a lovely time, didn't you? Sharon asked. Service was great, Ken agreed, but why don't they just pay the servers better, so we don't have to pay more? Sharon agreed with Ken, but she still left a 20% tip. One of Bob's favorite activities since moving to the United States was watching television. She especially loved watching the commercials. You really can buy anything here in America, she told her friends. One afternoon she was watching television and saw a commercial that really grabbed her attention. It showed a cartoon woman tossing and turning. The woman in the commercial was unable to sleep because she was busy thinking about the day that had passed and worrying about the day ahead. Bob wasn't quite sure what the commercial was advertising. Was it a bed? Was it a pillow? Was it just a public service announcement urging people to sleep more? Suddenly a voice on the television began speaking very quickly, listing side effects of the sleeping pill the commercial was advertising. One of the side effects was insomnia. Bob thought that seemed like an odd side effect for a sleeping pill. The next day Bob happened to be in the local neighborhood pharmacy picking up a few things. She remembered the commercial she had seen the night before for the sleeping pills. She walked up and down the aisles looking for them. Since she saw it advertised on television, she thought she might try them. Sometimes she had a hard time sleeping. When she couldn't find the pills on her own, she walked over to the pharmacy counter and asked the pharmacist where she could find the pills. Do you have a prescription? The pharmacist asked. Bon explained that she didn't, but she saw the pills advertised on television and thought she would try them. Those are not available over the counter, the pharmacist explained. Bob thought it was dumb for there to be a commercial for something she couldn't just go get at the store. She walked out of the pharmacy without buying anything. One of the first things Gustav wanted to do when he got to the United States was to see as much of it as he could. He would be flying into New York City's John F. Kennedy Airport. In New York he planned to see the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty. Then he wanted to go to Philadelphia to see the Liberty Bell. Then he wanted to go to the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where he hoped to see the White House, and maybe he would even see President. He knew that getting to the 3 East Coast cities was pretty easy. He could take a train or bus. Gustav wasn't sure though, about how he would get to the other parts of the United States he wanted to see. For example, Gustav really wanted to see the Grand Canyon in Arizona. He also really wanted to go to Los Angeles to see where some of his favorite movie stars lived. Once in New York City, Gustav asked the hotel concierge if they could arrange some trips for him. The concierge was helpful and informed Gustav about the different Amtrak trains he could take to Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. What about the Grand Canyon and Hollywood? Gustav asked. What about them? The concierge asked, looking confused. What about trips there? Gustav asked. The concierge pulled out a map and showed Gustav how far Arizona and California are from New York. A train there will take you about a week. A plane ride will take about 6 hours, the concierge explained. Gustav was disappointed. He had no idea that the United States was such a large country. He was determined to see as much as he could though. He wondered how much it would cost to rent a camper and drive it across the US. Kim was a housekeeper for a family in Beverly Hills. One morning when she went to work, she found a note from her boss. The note asked her to go to the supermarket and pick up a few things. There was a list of things Kim was supposed to buy. The note surprised Kim. She had only been a housekeeper for a week and had never been asked to go shopping before. Kim didn't even know where the nearest grocery store was. She also didn't know how to drive. Thankfully, the note also told her that the boss's driver would take her to the market. There was also a $50 bill. Once at the market, Kim walked through looking for the items on her list. She was confused though. The list read 1 pound of apples. Kim had purchased 1 kilogram of apples, but never a pound. In her country, they used the metric system. She wasn't sure if a pound was more or less than a kilogram. Kim decided to ask one of the grocery workers. The grocery worker was kind and explained that a pound was about half a kilogram. I wouldn't worry about it though, just use the scale, the grocery worker. Kim went to the scale and was happy to see that the scales didn't use the metric system she was used to. Kim weighed a pound of apples and put it in the shopping cart. The next item on the list was a gallon of milk. Kim wasn't sure how much a gallon was. She was used to buying a liter of milk. There was also no way to weigh a liter of milk. She was glad that the milk containers were labeled. She just wished the US used the metric system. John had been saving his allowance for 3 weeks so that he could buy a telescope he had seen advertised in the newspaper. According to the advertisement, the telescope cost $94.99. John also did some odd jobs around the neighborhood where he lived. He mowed the neighbor's lawn and took another neighbor's dog for a walk. Finally, he had $95. One Saturday, John walked to the store. He had brought with him the advertisement, which he had cut out from the newspaper. He asked a salesperson in the store where he could find the telescope advertised. He pulled out the newspaper ad and showed it to the salesperson to make sure they took him to the right one. The salesperson showed John where the telescopes were, and together, they looked for the one he wanted. It was called the Vega 600. I found it, John told the salesperson. The salesperson confirmed that the Vega 600 cost $94.99 and brought the box to the cash register so that John could pay for it. John was so excited. He felt like jumping up and down. He had worked so hard to get this. That will be $104.01, the salesperson told John. Did you advertise it as $94.99? John asked angrily. He thought the salesperson was trying to take advantage of him. Yes, it is, but we have to add sales tax. It's the law. In California, the sales tax is 9.5%, the salesperson explained. Why don't you just put the final price on advertisements and price tags then? John asked. Then everything seems more expensive and people won't come into the store to buy, the salesperson explained. Everything is more expensive, John said angrily, walking out of the store without the telescope. Maggie was meeting her friend Lisa at a French restaurant downtown for lunch. Lisa was visiting New York from Chile. They met in Chile over 10 years ago. That was the time when Maggie spent a semester abroad as part of her undergraduate studies. Lisa was a Chilean student who helped Maggie learn Spanish and how to play soccer. Even when Maggie came back to the United States, the two friends kept in touch with each other via Facebook and Skype. Maggie waved to Lisa from the table in the restaurant when she saw her Chilean friend walk in. Lisa looked the same, just a little older and a little fatter. Tell me what is new with you, Maggie asked Lisa. Lisa explained that she worked for an airline and was in town on business. I get to travel all the time now, Lisa told Maggie. Oh, really? Maggie replied. Yes, really, and I can even sometimes get tickets for friends and family members at really low prices, Lisa continued. Oh, really? Maggie replied. Maggie was annoying Lisa. Lisa was beginning to feel like Maggie didn't believe what she was saying. I can show you the memo from my job that explains it all if you don't believe me, Lisa said angrily. Why wouldn't I believe you? Maggie asked and confused. She thought it was great that Lisa had a job that took her all over the world, and that even let her do it with friends and family. Well, you keep saying oh, really? Like you are challenging what I'm saying, Lisa said. Maggie explained that when she said oh really, it just meant she found what Lisa was saying interesting and wanted her to elaborate. Oh, really? Lisa said before the two friends both burst out laughing. When William was transferred to a job in Texas, he was really worried about making friends. On his first day in the factory though, everyone was really friendly. You should join our softball league, his co-worker Richard suggested. That's a great idea, thanks, but I don't have a bat or a glove, William said to Richard. Richard jotted down on a piece of paper the name and address of a local sports supply shop nearby. They will have everything you need, Richard said. On his day off, William went to the sports shop. Boy, Rich wasn't kidding, William said to himself. Not only did they have bats and gloves, but also equipment for all kinds of sports. The store also featured an extensive gun selection. Those are toy guns? William asked. The salesperson shook his head. No, sir. These are all working weapons. I have some machetes and knives too if you want something more traditional, the salesperson explained. No, I just came in for some softball equipment, William told the salesperson. Well, you can take home any of these lovely rifles or guns, along with your softball equipment today, the salesperson continued. I don't need a license, William asked. The salesperson shook his head. There's no waiting period, William asked. The salesperson shook his head again. I don't have to take a safety course, William asked. He couldn't believe it was so easy to buy a gun. No, sir. It's cash and carry here, the salesperson said. So can I show you a fine firearm today? William shook his head. No, but can I take a picture? My friends back in New York won't believe it's this easy to buy a gun here. Sure, buddy, the salesperson said. I'll even take a picture of you with any weapons you want. Mildred went to pick up her son Bill from school one afternoon. When she got to the school, Mildred noticed that Bill looked upset. He was pouting and did not want to look at her. What's wrong? She asked him. I got in trouble, Bill said in a low voice. What happened? Mildred asked gently. I got put in timeout for grabbing a toy from Mary, Bill said. Mildred wasn't sure what a timeout was. She knew that timeouts were called in sports whenever a player was injured, but she wasn't sure how that would be used in a kindergarten classroom. Mildred was sure though that her son grabbing a toy from a classmate was not correct. The next day when Mildred took Bill to school, she stopped the teacher. She asked the teacher to explain what a timeout was. Mildred told the teacher that Bill was very upset about the timeout he had the day before. The teacher explained that timeout was a discipline tool she used in the classroom. When she saw Bill grab the toy from Mary, she told him to go into timeout. Timeout is a chair next to the teacher's desk where a student has to sit quietly when they do something wrong. They aren't kicked out of the classroom, just taken out of the immediate situation, so they can reflect on what they did wrong, the teacher explained. Mildred thought it was an interesting way to teach self-control to little kids. Can I use this at home? Mildred asked the teacher. Of course. The teacher said. Later that night, Mildred got into an argument with her husband for something. In the middle of the argument she slammed her hand on the kitchen counter. Mommy, you need a timeout, Bill said. When Julia left for school in the morning, she noticed a pigeon sitting very closely to the front door of her apartment building. Usually pigeons flew away whenever someone got too close to them, but this pigeon didn't seem to care. Julia didn't think too much of it though. When she got back home from school that afternoon, she noticed the pigeon was in the same exact place. It seemed the pigeon hadn't moved at all. Julia moved closer. She noticed the pigeon had a wound on its wing. She was worried that a dog or a cat would eat the injured animal. Julie ran upstairs to her apartment and told her mom about the pigeon. We have to help it. Julie insisted. Julie's mom made a disgusted face. I don't want to. Pigeons have diseases, she said. Julie began to cry. This made Julie's mom feel bad. She gave in, but she gave Julie some rules. The pigeon had to stay in the kitchen in a storage bin. Julie's mom didn't want to have to touch the dirty bird. Julie put one of her old baby blankets on the bottom of a deep storage bin. While Julie tried to feed the injured bird bits of moist bread, Julie's mom looked online for local animal rescue organizations. She felt silly trying to save a pigeon though. Finally she found an organization that would take the bird, but not until the next morning. Julie stayed up all night watching the bird. The next morning Julia and her mother took the subway to the bird rescue organization. Many people on the train gave Julie and her mother strange looks. Julie's mother just shrugged. When they got to the rescue organization, Julie told the worker, please take good care of Sebastian. You want me to buy you what? Ken asked Elizabeth. He was sure he hadn't heard her correctly. Elizabeth had just moved in with Ken. She came to Los Angeles from New York City after a year of long-distance dating. I want you to buy me a shopping cart, Elizabeth repeated. In Los Angeles there are two types of people who use shopping carts. The homeless are one. They use shopping carts to carry their possessions. Old ladies are the second. They use it to carry their laundry back and forth, their groceries, and maybe even to sell tamales, Ken explained. Elizabeth felt insulted. Are you saying I'm an old lady? She asked. She then continued to explain that she didn't want to rely on Ken to drive her to the supermarket or the laundromat. Elizabeth didn't know how to drive, but she wanted to be self-sufficient. Besides, she continued, in New York City everyone has a shopping cart, not just the homeless or old ladies. One afternoon when Elizabeth came home from work, there was a red shopping cart in the driveway. Ken had put a big red bow on it. Do you like your new wheels? Ken asked Elizabeth. She felt happy now that she could handle some chores on her own. The next day she loaded the shopping cart with dirty clothes and set off to walk the 3 blocks to the nearest laundromat. This was not as easy as she thought. The sidewalks were uneven and the cart often got stuck, causing dirty socks to leap out of the cart. Elizabeth had to stop several times to pick up stray clothes. Then nearly every house between her house and the laundromat had a big dog that barked at her. Elizabeth hated big scary dogs. Maria received a Facebook notification on her mobile phone, which says, you have a new message from Jimmy. Maria didn't know any Jimmy except an ex-boyfriend 10 years ago. Maria opened the message and sure enough, it was from the man she dated a long time ago. You should Google me and see what I've been up to, the message said. Maria thought the message was strange, but out of curiosity, she typed in Jimmy's full name in the Google search bar. She saw pictures of him and a number of articles. The articles were about him filing for divorce from his wife, who was a high school teacher in New York City. She had been accused of having an affair with one of her students. She had been fired and was facing criminal charges. She had a daughter with Jimmy, a successful attorney. Is your mind blown? Jimmy wrote in a separate Facebook message. After a while, Maria didn't know if she should respond. Why was he reaching out to her after so many years? Did he want her to know he was divorced so that they could date again? Maria decided to play along. Yes, my mind is blown, and I hope things have settled down for you and your daughter, Maria typed. Jimmy didn't respond that night. Maria thought it would be the last time she heard from Jimmy. A week later, Maria received another Facebook notification. It was another message from Jimmy. I was hoping that you would have time in your busy schedule to see me, the message read. Maria hesitated. When they stopped dating years ago, it was because Jimmy had written a cruel message to her. Should she give him another chance? Scott received a paintball gun and some paintballs from his mom for his 16th birthday. When his mom gave him the present, she told him that she would take him to a paintball range with some of his friends. The range was in an open field and the company that owned the range provided safety equipment like padding and face masks. Getting hit by a paintball hurt and could cause serious injury. The paintball range was 20 miles away, and Scott had to wait till the weekend to try out his new equipment. He didn't want to wait that long. He wanted to play with his new toy now. When his mom was taking a nap, he texted a friend who lived down the block to meet him in front of his house. I want to show you what I got for my birthday, Scott told his friend. He loaded up the paintball gun with the colored balls filled with brightly colored paint. He started shooting it at the trash cans that were on the curb. Just then a police patrol car was driving down the street. Scott missed the trash cans and ended up shooting a paintball right at the police car. The police thought they were under attack. Scott knew he had done something wrong and ran inside the house with his friend. Soon a police helicopter was flying overhead, and Scott could hear police sirens approaching his house. The sounds of the helicopter and the sirens woke up Scott's mother. She looked out her window and saw a spotlight right on her house, and 3 police cars arrived. What is going on? She wondered aloud. She went to the living room, and turned on the local news to see if there was any information about what was happening in her neighborhood. Bob knew that the house he'd just purchased was in a historically rough neighborhood. There was a history of gang violence, including shootings, in the neighborhood. That is probably why the house was so inexpensive. The previous owners of the house had it foreclosed. Then some house flippers bought the property for a very cheap price, renovated it, raised the sales price, and sold it. Bob thought the house was still a good bargain though. After he moved in, Bob began to see that many of the renovations to the home were merely cosmetic. While the house flippers put in new stainless steel appliances in the kitchen, they hadn't upgraded the electrical work. This meant that every time Bob ran the dishwasher and the coffee machine, all the power in the house went out. Bob spent over $1,000 to have the house rewired. The new carpets that the house flippers installed was put over the original hardwood floors. Bob decided to rip out the ugly oatmeal-colored carpets, and refinish the old floors. That was another $3,000. The house was an old stucco house that got very hot in the summer and cold in the winter. The house flippers installed some cheap windows. Bob hired a contractor to put in new double-pane storm windows and install ceiling fans. That was another few $1,000s. Bob wanted to make the house energy efficient, so he leased solar panels that were installed on the roof. This not only lowered his monthly electric bill, but added value to the home. Within 2 years, all the changes Bob made to the house totaled more than $20,000. In that time the value of his home rose almost $100,000. Bob felt he made a good investment. He knew when he sold the home, he would get more money than he paid. When Johnny was a kid, all he talked about was becoming a baseball star. Of course he wasn't alone. Most young boys growing up in the United States want to become a Major League Baseball player at one time or another. He remembers watching his favorite players on TV when he was young, and how his father would take him to see the Giants play at Candlestick Park. Johnny recalls the old stadium, and how big it seemed to him as a child. His dad took him onto the field one day when the team was having a photo day. Johnny couldn't believe how big the field was. All his favorite Giants were there taking pictures with fans. Can I take a picture with Willie Mays, Dad? Johnny asked gleefully. Of course, Johnny. Let's get in line, said his dad. Willie Mays was one of the greatest players to ever play the game, and he loved kids, too. That is why the line to take a picture with him was so long. Johnny didn't mind though. He was in baseball heaven. The Giants played their arch-rival, the Los Angeles Dodgers, that day. There had always been a bit of bad blood between the two teams over the years. It started when both teams were based in New York. They were cross-town rivals at that time. After the teams moved to California in the late 1950s, the rivalry continued. The Dodgers were always one of the better teams in the National League, and even though Johnny grew up a Giants fan, he really didn't hate the Dodgers. I think the rivalry was blown up, to tell the truth, Johnny said years later. Baseball fans are very fickle and stubborn though, and some play the rivalry up as much as they can. No true Dodger or Giant fan would ever admit liking the other team in public, but Johnny suspects there is a mutual respect for each team in both cities. Last week Chris went on her first deep-sea fishing trip off the coast of Catalina Island. She had always enjoyed fishing when she was a child, but had never gone fishing in the ocean. Her dad liked to fish very often. Her big brother Jack was never the outdoor type, so her dad took her out often. One of his favorite spots was Lake Isabella, which was about 2 hours from their home. She recalls how she and her dad would spend a long, leisurely day driving to the lake, and then taking his small boat out on the water. It was quiet and peaceful for the most part. Those memories remain some of her most cherished moments of her life. Chris has a friend called Robert. On this day, Robert invited Chris to join him on his company's fishing trip. Robert said it wouldn't cost much, but would be a lot of fun. He knew Chris enjoyed lake fishing and figured she would have a great time. Okay, said Chris, and to the ocean they went. The first thing Chris noticed, however, was the motion. Wow, this boat really rocks, Chris told Robert. Don't worry about it. You will get used to it, he said. The trip to the waters off Catalina Island took about an hour. Chris marveled at how quickly she lost sight of the mainland. It was a bit scary when she thought about how alone they were in this great ocean. Soon, it was time to collect squid for bait. The small boat stopped in the water, and the crew turned the bright light into the ocean to attract the squid. Before long, thousands of squid rose to the surface and were collected for bait. After about an hour, Chris didn't feel the rocking motion anymore. They were ready to fish. Chris caught her first ocean trout. It was a beautiful day. Tina was very involved in her daughter's education. She made sure her daughter did her homework. She also volunteered at her school. She especially liked to help parents who did not speak English. Tina often would translate at parent-teacher conferences and meetings. She also translated some of the papers that the school sent home. Tina was a member of the Parent-Teacher Association. She went to every meeting and open forum. Tina was so active in her daughter's school that she was elected to be vice president of the Parent-Teacher Association. The principal of the school did not like Tina though. She felt Tina was too involved. She didn't like how Tina insisted that there be translation at every meeting, and that every paper that went home be in different languages. The principal felt Tina was creating more work for her and her staff. She thought Tina was a troublemaker. The way Tina looked didn't help her. She had many tattoos, and often dyed her hair in non-traditional colors like pink and green. One evening, after Tina's daughter received an award for her good grades, Tina went up to greet the principal. The principal responded coldly, "Congratulations." The principal then offered some advice to Tina's daughter. "When you grow up, don't become like your mother," the principal told the young girl. The little girl was confused. Tina was furious. How dare the principal speak to her that way? Tina may not have looked like all the other parents, but what she looked like shouldn't matter. Tina's daughter hugged her mother. "I don't care that you have green hair, Mommy," she said. "I care that you care about me and my school." Millie's sister Arlene had been battling breast cancer for 5 years. Then the doctor gave Arlene some bad news. The cancer had spread to her brain and there was no treatment that would cure her. "I'll keep taking care of you," Millie told her sister. Millie and Arlene were both in their 50s, but Millie was 5 years older than Arlene. Arlene would always be Millie's little sister. Throughout Arlene's illness, Millie took care of things. Millie went with Arlene to all of her appointments. Millie went to all of Arlene's chemotherapy and radiation treatments. When Arlene lost her hair because of the chemo, Millie helped her pick a natural-looking wig. Arlene was appreciative, but also felt bad. Millie had a family of her own to take care of, and yet she spent most of her time taking care of Arlene. Arlene told Millie she wanted to be put in a hospice. Millie did not know what that was. Arlene's doctor gave the sisters some brochures. The brochures explained that hospice care would try to make Arlene as comfortable as possible by providing pain management. They also focused on the emotional health of patients and their families by providing counseling. Millie was reluctant to place Arlene in hospice. Millie felt like she was abandoning her baby sister. Arlene insisted though. "It's about time someone else wait on me hand and foot," Arlene joked. Millie went with Arlene to check into the hospice. Not only did the staff take care of Arlene, they also had activities for Millie, a member of the family. The staff told Millie that she could even spend the night here when she wanted. They asked Arlene what some of her favorite foods were so their chef could make what she liked. Arlene felt comfortable in the hospice. Donald Walker always looked forward to summer. As he sat down in class, he thought about all the things he was going to do during his summer break. He even made a list. On the top of his list was swimming. Donald loved to go swimming. Even though he was excited to get a break, there was something, or someone he was going to miss. Sarah Lee Parker was his classmate, but he rarely talked to her. Donald liked Sarah a lot. He knew he was going to miss her. The first day of summer had arrived. Donald woke up around noon. He hated waking up early for school, so he wanted to sleep late for the first day of summer. As soon as he woke up, he put on his swimming shorts, got a towel, kissed his mom goodbye, and ran to the park to go to the pool. As Donald jumped into the pool, his heart began to beat fast. The water was clear, but cold. One of Donald's favorite things to do at the pool was to go on the diving board. As Donald stood on the edge of the diving board, he started jumping in order to get high enough to do a flip. He jumped once, and then twice. When he was about to jump off again, he saw that Sarah was looking at him from the entrance of the pool. Donald got so nervous that he couldn't finish the flip, and he landed on his back. Everyone in the deep end of the pool started laughing. Donald felt embarrassed as he swam to the edge of the pool, but when he got there, he saw Sarah waiting for him. Ouch, that had to hurt. You want to go swimming with me? Sarah asked Donald. Donald said sure nervously, and started swimming with Sarah. Donald had never been happier, and never been in that much pain. Betty Gonzalez likes going to the movies. She likes to wait until there are multiple movies she wants to see. She'll usually go early in the day in order to see at least 2 movies. Betty is proud that her record is seeing 4 movies in one day. She usually sneaks in snacks to eat at the movie theater. Betty doesn't care if no one wants to go with her, she'll go alone and have fun. It was Saturday morning. Betty saw that there were 3 movies she wanted to see showing at the theater. Betty got her purse and made herself 2 sandwiches, bought a soda, got her sweater, and went to the movies. After she had seen 2 of the movies, she bought a soda and was going to sneak into the next movie. As Betty walked up to the room where the movie was showing, she noticed that a man was checking for tickets. Betty began to get nervous. Betty didn't have a ticket, but she really wanted to see this movie. She did not like the other 2 movies. She knew she was going to like this one, because her favorite actor was in it. The man that was checking for tickets stopped Betty as she tried to pass him. He asked her for her ticket. Betty didn't know what to do. The man was speaking in English, so Betty decided to speak in Spanish. She told the man something in Spanish, and then walked off while she was still talking. The man was confused, and he didn't know what to do. Betty looked like she was mad at the man, so he didn't want to do anything else to get her even angrier. He just let her go through. When Betty got to her seat, her heart was still beating fast. She started laughing. She took a sip of soda and watched the movie in peace. Paul Young and Mark Allen were good friends. They both hated summer. Paul hated that it was always hot. Mark hated that the park by his house was always crowded. I hate summer, Paul told Mark as they played video games in Mark's room. I know. Besides not going to school, there is nothing else that's good about summer, Mark said. As the 2 friends played their game, Mark's mom started getting upset with the boys. Why don't you boys go outside? Mark's mom asked. Mark replied, too many people, and it's too hot. Mark's mom had enough. She unplugged the game and told Mark that they had to go outside and do something else. They decided to go to the arcade, because at least there they could play games and be inside an air-conditioned building. When they got there, they realized that 2 of their friends were at the arcade, too. It was Susan and Carol. Paul liked Susan. Mark didn't really like Carol that much, but he agreed to stay with Carol, so that Paul could hang out with Susan alone. Don't do anything stupid, Mark, Paul said. Oh, shut up and go talk to Susan, Mark said. Paul went up to Susan and asked her if she wanted to play a shooting game with him. She said yes. After they played the game, they went back to meet with Carol and Mark. You know, Carol and I were about to leave. You guys want to come with us? Susan asked the boys. Sure, where to? Paul asked. Susan said that they were going to the park, because she liked to see all the people having fun there. Awesome, I love going to the park during the summer, Paul said. He looked at Mark and whispered, shut up, don't say anything. They all left, and Mark looked like he was going to cry. I hate summer, Mark said to himself. Nancy Young had always loved celebrating the 4th of July, the holiday that celebrates America's independence. She loved the meaning of the day. She also loved lighting fireworks. She loved all types of fireworks. Nancy had 3 brothers, and they all loved the 4th of July. Nancy's youngest brother Peter loved lighting up the fireworks. Although Nancy's parents didn't have that much money, they decided to buy a lot of fireworks for their children. They wanted their children to have a great 4th of July. Once they got the fireworks, Nancy decided to split them with her brothers. She got the most, and her brothers got the rest. Nancy's parents decided to go to the park to light the fireworks this year. Peter decided to light the first one. It exploded, and scared Nancy. Nancy decided to light one. It was a sparkler, which meant that it would only send sparks up into the sky, and would not explode. Nancy loved how it looked. She lit another one to see how it would look like. Peter had the idea to jump over the fireworks. Even though Nancy said no, Peter decided to jump over it. Peter got ready. He tied his shoes to make sure his shoelaces weren't hanging out of his shoes, and that he had enough distance to jump over the sparks. Peter started running and then jumped. When he landed on the other side, he started screaming in pain. A spark had gotten into Peter's eye. He fell to the ground and started asking for ice. Nancy brought him a bag of ice to cover his eye. During the next day, Peter had to get glasses because of the damage he had suffered in his eye. The doctor asked him, "What's the important lesson here?" Peter responded with, "Don't jump over fireworks. I was 10 years old when we first got a computer. I didn't know what to do with it, so I just played video games on it. My brother was 6 years older than me, so he would use the computer to go into chat rooms. After we had had the computer for around a year, I noticed my brother would always be in chat rooms. He would always have a private message open as well. It took me another year to realize that my brother was dating someone online. I always knew my brother's girlfriend as Snow Bunny 85, because he never told us officially that she was his girlfriend. I later found out her name was Lily. My brother always tried to be careful not to leave any pictures Lily sent him on the desktop of the computer, but sometimes he would. She looked pretty. I didn't understand why my brother wanted, or felt that he needed to keep his relationship secret. A few years later, my brother told me that he had broken up with a girlfriend he had. I asked why, but he didn't want to talk about it. I found out what really happened one day, while I was using the computer. My brother had saved his last conversation with Lily. It seemed like Lily had lied to my brother. They had met a couple of times in real life, and they seemed to have had a real relationship. The only problem was that Lily already had a husband. My brother was crushed to find out that she was married. On that day I realized that an online relationship is risky. It's up to you to find someone that you can trust and hopefully isn't lying to you. I hope my brother realized that, too. Friends make life easier, or at least they should. My best friend's name is Susan. I call her Susie. Susie and I would always hang out together. Just to clarify, my name is Michael. Yes, I am a boy, and Susan is a girl. Everyone that knew us always thought we were in a relationship, but that wasn't the case. I loved Susie like a sister, and she loved me like a brother. Well, I used to think she did. It all started when Susie got a boyfriend. I was happy for her, because she was sad and lonely. Those were her words, not mine. When she introduced me to Richard, her boyfriend, I tried my best to get along with him. Although I tried my best, Richard didn't seem to like me. Maybe his friends told him that Susie and I were always hanging around, and they thought we were secretly in love with each other. Richard became increasingly jealous whenever my name was mentioned. It started tearing up their relationship. Susie began to stay away from me. I would call her, go over to her house, or wait for her outside of school, but she was always busy with Richard. She would say, "Sorry, Mike, I'll call you when I get home, okay?" I knew it was a lie. Susie and I haven't spoken in a month. As I knew Susie had always wanted to go to Las Vegas, so I was going to surprise Susie by telling her that I was going to take her. However, it seemed that the ship had sailed. I heard Susie and Richard were going to Las Vegas for her birthday. I'm moving on, and I'm hanging out with some other friends. It's not the same, but I guess anyone who chooses a relationship over a friendship was never a good friend to begin with. Yet, I find myself questioning what are friends. It was a stupid mistake. Before I tell you about my mistake, I have to tell you about my father. My father Joseph Thomas was a big name in the music business. He managed a lot of different rock bands in the 60s. By the end of his career, he had saved up some money and decided to buy himself a cabin in a little town in Oregon. He didn't want to live in Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, or any other big cities. He wanted to escape the big city life. It was a stupid mistake. Before I tell you about my mistake, I have to tell you about my father. My father Joseph Thomas was a big name in the music business. He managed a lot of different rock bands in the 60s. By the end of his career, he had saved up some money and decided to buy himself a cabin in a little town in Oregon. He didn't want to live in Los Angeles, New York City, Chicago, or any other big cities. He wanted to escape the big city life. During his time in the music industry, my father had collected various objects. He had different items from different artists. He had one of Jimi Hendrix's guitars, and a medallion that Janis Joplin had given him. Did I know this? No, I didn't. My dad always kept to himself. He was out on the road a lot, and he never really cared about keeping in touch with his kids. So, when he died, I figured all of his stuff at the cabin would be garbage. I told the town's sheriff to throw everything out. I also told him to send me the paperwork for the cabin. I read about the discovery they made in my father's cabin. I couldn't believe it. Hendrix's guitar sold for over $1 million, and so did the medallion. As I had already asked the sheriff to throw out everything as garbage, I wasn't entitled to anything, which probably made my father happy. My first road trip was horrible. When I turned 24 years old, my father lent me his car to go from Los Angeles to Chicago. I told my dad that my friend George was going with me, and he was bringing his girlfriend Nancy. My dad liked that George was going, because he was a responsible young adult, which made me think that my dad doesn't think of me as an adult. When the day we were scheduled to leave arrived, George's girlfriend didn't arrive at my house until 5 p.m. When we agreed we would meet at 2 p.m., it wasn't bad. I had been waiting for this road trip for a year. I could wait a little longer. When Nancy arrived, we packed up her suitcase and hit the road. I was friends with both of them, but George was my friend first. I started getting annoyed with them right away. Even though I had my music playing in the car, I could still hear them in the back kissing and calling each other baby, sweetie, sweetheart, and other nauseating cute names. I didn't like it, but what was I going to do? George took over the wheel after we left California. He was talking to Nancy the whole time. When we got near the Grand Canyon, Nancy started talking about how she always wanted to go see it. That was when George said those 7 words I hated the most: what my baby wants, my baby gets. He started going down a road that led to the Grand Canyon without even asking me. I started to get really annoyed, but decided not to say anything. It was really late, but they didn't care. It turned out the road that led to the Grand Canyon closed after a certain time. Nancy felt embarrassed, and George started apologizing to me. After we got back on the highway, I drove all the way to Chicago. George knew that I was bugged, so he tried to keep me company. He even told Nancy to sit in the back, which she did. It was a horrible drive. I couldn't believe I had to drive all the way back to Los Angeles with them. One of the most important lessons you should learn is when you drink, you shouldn't drive. I learned this the hard way. Last year, I got a DUI, which means driving under the influence. If you get pulled over and you smell like alcohol, the police will ask you to take a breathalyzer test. When you do the test, you have to blow really hard into a machine, which will then tell you if you are over the limit to drive a vehicle. The limit is usually 0.8 blood alcohol volume. So, if you pass that, you are going to jail. Even though you won't go to jail for a long time, you will be suffering the consequences of your mistake for a long time. Here is a list of the things you will have to do if you get a DUI: go to court, go to alcohol education classes, go to Alcoholics Anonymous, pay a lot of money in fines. If you don't want to pay, you will have to do community service. I got my DUI almost 2 years ago, and I am still suffering the consequences. I still have 56 hours for community service. I have to update my insurance policy and deal with the Department of Motor Vehicles. You waste a lot of time and money. It gets difficult to get a job, because you have to let your future employer know that you have been arrested. It's not worth it. If you are thinking about going out to celebrate and party with friends and family, do one of the following: get a designated driver, take the bus or train, or call a cab. It may cost you a little bit of money, but compared to how much money you will lose if you get a DUI, it's nothing. Don't drink and drive. When a movie is going to premiere, the theater will usually show the film during a midnight screening. Anthony Baker and his girlfriend Linda Moore love going to see new movies at midnight. A lot of people usually show up early to make line. Anthony likes going to stand in line and talk to different people that are in the line. Anthony told Linda about the new movie that was coming out. Linda went online to buy the tickets. She wanted to make sure that they would get tickets. Linda got an email from the theater. It said that she could pick up the tickets at the theater. Anthony took Linda out to eat before they went to the theater to wait in line. Anthony was excited because the movie they were going to see was the sequel to one of Anthony's favorite movies. When they got to the theater, Anthony and Linda went to the back of the line and started talking to the people in the back. They all seemed friendly, and some of them actually knew Anthony and Linda. After about an hour of waiting in line, the theater started letting people in. Anthony hugged Linda and started jumping up and down. Linda loved going to the theater with Anthony. He seemed like a little kid when he was there. It always put a smile on Linda's face. When they got inside, Anthony and Linda found their seats. They noticed everyone in the theater started singing a song that came out in the first movie, so Anthony got up and started clapping and singing along. Linda looked up at Anthony and thought to herself, it's a whole different experience seeing a midnight screening. Some of the most popular places to visit during summer are the beaches. Kenneth Green loved going to beaches. He lived close to Venice Beach, and could walk to the beach in 30 minutes. He could smell the ocean whenever he woke up. Kenneth and his friends decided to go to the beach the first day of the summer. When they got there, they found it was filled with tourists and people trying to escape the heat. Even though the beach was filled with people, Kenneth didn't care. He knew all the cool places to go. He was friends with some shop owners. He was also friends with the owners of a little Mexican restaurant. He had a little booth reserved for him during the summer, so that whenever he got hungry, he didn't have to wait for a table. The owners were family friends of Kenneth and they loved having him around. Kenneth didn't like to abuse their relationship, so he only went to the restaurant once or twice a week, and he always left good tips. There are a lot of activities to do at the beach. People can go swimming, rent a bike, play volleyball, or shop around. Kenneth is always careful when he is around volleyball nets and people bicycling. Last year, he was walking by the volleyball nets when a large man jumped up to hit the ball, which ended up hitting Kenneth right in the head. The man ran to Kenneth to make sure he was okay. He was okay, but a bit dizzy. As Kenneth was trying to get his balance back, he walked right into the path of a bicycle. He crashed into a woman riding a bicycle, and they both fell down. It wasn't Kenneth's favorite summer. I had the worst birthday of my life last year. It all started when my sister Donna invited my ex-girlfriend Jennifer. For some reason, Donna and Jennifer started getting along after we broke up. How convenient, I told Jennifer. Donna was always trying to make my life hell. I guess that's her job as the older sister. She was 20 years old, while I turned 17 years old last year. My mother had worked very hard to keep the party they were going to throw for me a secret. It didn't work, because Donna had a big mouth, but I was trying to keep up the secret for my mother's sake. My dad got home from work and told my mom to get the kids so that we could all go out for dinner. We showed up at my favorite restaurant, which has a private room in the back for parties. Everything went downhill as soon as I opened the door. My other ex-girlfriend Sarah was there, because she wanted to try and fix our relationship. I'll never forget the look on Donna's eyes. She looked like she saw a ghost. Donna grabbed Jennifer and told her to go outside. Jennifer and Sarah never got along. It might have something to do with me, but I'm not sure. Jennifer hadn't seen Sarah, because Donna took Jennifer outside before she had the chance. I took Sarah by the hand, and asked her who had invited her. She looked at me confused, because apparently I had invited her through a text message a week ago. It was true. I invited her, but I never thought she would show up. When Jennifer finally came into the room, she saw Sarah and became very angry. She looked at me and started yelling at me. "Why is she here, Jason?" asked Jennifer. I looked at her equally angry and said, "What are you talking about? What are you doing here?" Jennifer started yelling at Sarah, and Sarah started yelling at Jennifer. They got so angry that they started fighting, which eventually got us kicked out of the restaurant. My mother was crushed when she got there. Donna got grounded for a month. That was one horrible birthday. Let me tell you about my family. They are embarrassing to say the least. The first time I brought a boy home to meet my parents, they asked him countless questions that no parent should ask. When did you lose your virginity? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? How many sexual partners have you had? Safe to say, that boy I brought home stopped talking to me after he met my parents. I stayed single throughout my time at high school. It was not that I didn't like anyone or that no one liked me. It was that my parents had a rule. They had to approve of whoever I would be dating. Sometimes I thought they had that rule specifically to embarrass me. I hate that I can't have normal parents. They are weird. They like collecting old books and watching old movies. They listen to old records on an old record player. They say that it's better than listening to an iPod. I always let them know that at least I can listen to my iPod when I go out. The last day of high school had passed, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I decided to take a year off and work. My parents didn't like it, but it was my decision to make. I got a job at a little restaurant called Baker's Cabin. It was a nice restaurant where people could sit down and have a good steak dinner at a reasonable price. I liked working there. However, what I liked most was the bartender Paul. He had barely turned 21, and was already working behind the bar. We started talking. I think he really likes me, but I don't want things to get awkward when he meets my parents. One day, my friend Susan told Paul that the only way he could date me was to meet my parents. Paul went over that night with some records his dad had given him, and offered them to my parents. They went nuts, and invited him in. They started asking him questions, but not about his sex, life or religious beliefs. The questions were all about music. They really liked him, and they were actually acting normal. I think Paul is the guy for me. I got out of school at 7 p.m. and didn't have anything to do, so I started walking home. I lived an hour away from my school, so I got home at around 8 p.m. When I opened the door to go inside, I saw my brother, my mom, and my brother's girlfriend, all sitting down on the couch. My brother Jeff was sitting with his girlfriend Betty. I walked in slowly. I looked at my mom, who had tears in her eyes. It was very tense. I turned to Jeff. "She's pregnant," Jeff said. Jeff and his girlfriend started laughing and said, "Yes." I started jumping up and down with joy. I always wanted to be an uncle. My first reaction was to start screaming, "It wasn't me. It wasn't me." I started screaming that because my parents always thought I was going to be the first one to give them a grandchild. They certainly didn't think Jeff was going to do it. I gave them each a hug, and I wished them luck. After 8.5 months had passed, Betty gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. My family and I were as happy as it could be. They named the baby Mark. Mark was the name of my father, who passed away a year ago. My brother said that he looked like my dad, so he decided to give him the name in honor of my dad. We all gathered at the hospital and started laughing, talking. We each took turns carrying the baby. It was the happiest moment in our family's history. We only wished that my father would have been a part of it. Jeff looked at baby Mark. He told me that my father's spirit was here. He would always be there to look over and take care of Mark. I smiled and gave him a hug. William Moore didn't trust the idea of marriage. He came from a broken family. His mother and father divorced when he was only 10 years old. Both of his two brothers had been married twice. Each marriage ended in divorce. Marriage is the end, William always said. His view on marriage always got in the way of his relationships. He would go out on dates with women who would always be looking for something serious. William wasn't looking for that. He wanted someone to have fun with, and that was all. William hadn't found someone he felt strongly about in a long time. The last time he truly felt something for a girl was during his last year of college. Her name was Linda. Linda was in William's math class, and she always helped William with his homework. They started hanging out after school, and going on dates every week. When William told Linda about his views on marriage, she didn't get scared. In fact, she liked the idea. It's a lot of pressure. A lot of guys think that women just want marriage. You know, I don't. At least not right now, Linda said. William decided to give Linda a chance. He liked her. They had the same view on marriage. Yet, during the final month of school, Linda got an email that changed her life. She got a chance to go study in Europe. William didn't want Linda to go. Linda said that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. William even thought about proposing to Linda to see if she would stay, but he knew that she would not change her mind. He let her go. It made William sad. He didn't know if he wanted marriage, but he really wanted to have someone there for him. My last class of the day was my physical education class. I always hated it. For the past 3 years, people had found ways to embarrass me. Things weren't so bad at first. A basketball hit me in the head when I was talking to a girl. I was trying to climb the big rope in the gym and fell down in front of everyone, who started laughing. However, the worst thing was yet to happen. At the end of a year, we always have a test to see how we have improved. We have to run a mile. The whole class does this at the same time. I wasn't the fastest runner, but I knew I could get a good score for this test. For this activity, we have to go into the locker room and change into our uniform. I left my uniform in my locker the other day, since it was clean. When I opened my locker, I saw a note saying, "Buy new uniform, loser." Someone had broken into my locker and took my clothes. I told the teacher, who went into his office and gave me an old uniform that had been left behind. "Suit up and I'll see you out there," he said. I tried tying a rope around the shorts to make them fit, but they wouldn't. The bell rang, and I knew my teacher would be mad if I didn't get out there. I started running, and barely got there before he started calling names. After he finished with the roll call, we started the test. The whole class set off running. I was doing okay at the beginning. After a while, people started passing me. A lot of people laughed at my shorts. Then it happened. One guy pushed me out of his way, and I ended up falling. My shorts fell first, and then I fell to the ground. That was when all the girls started passing me. One of them shouted, He doesn't have clean underwear." I picked up my shorts, and walked the rest of the mile. It was the most embarrassing moment in my life. Robert Garcia always wanted to play baseball. He was small and weak, but he loved playing the game. Robert told his dad that he wanted to play baseball, but he felt that he was too weak to get into the school baseball team. Robert's dad looked at him and said, "Son, strength doesn't come from muscles. You never know what you can do till you try. Go out there and try it. You have to take a chance." Robert was inspired. He went to the tryouts at school the next day. Even though Robert was the smallest person at the tryouts, he didn't give up. When the coach looked at Robert and asked him what he was doing there, "I'm here to try out, coach," Robert said. The coach wanted to laugh. Robert knew it, but the coach stopped himself. "Okay, let's see what you got," the coach said. He gave him a bat. Robert stepped up to bat. The pitcher threw the ball, and Robert swung as hard as he could. After he opened his eyes, Robert noticed that he had missed the ball. This happened 2 more times, and then he was out. The coach went out to talk to Robert. "Sorry, son. This sport is not for everyone." Robert didn't understand. He felt angry and sad. He thanked the coach for the opportunity, and started walking off the field. Then he heard some of the guys making fun of him for being small. Robert couldn't take it anymore. He started running home. The coach saw Robert start running, and couldn't believe how fast he was running. Robert was running faster than the team's fastest player. The coach told his assistant, "Go to the office and get me the home number for that kid." Robert got home, and his dad told him the good news. He had gotten on the team. Robert couldn't believe it. He heard the coach's message, "Sorry for not believing in you, Speedy. Welcome to the team." Charles and Richard were known around the school for being troublemakers. They weren't allowed to attend the school dance, because they had gotten caught trying to sneak into the girls' locker room. Although Charles and Richard always got in trouble, sometimes they didn't deserve it. They just had a bad reputation. That's what happens when you have a bad reputation. The school dance was coming up. Charles and Richard had a plan on how to sneak in. They were really troublemakers this time. It was the tradition that before each dance, the school band would perform the school's song. Along with the band, our mascot would come out to dance. Our mascot was a bulldog, but we had both a male and a female bulldogs. Charles and Richard decided to go into the dance as the bulldogs. They convinced the students who were going to be the mascots not to go. On the night of the dance, Charles and Richard entered the gym as the mascots. They were dancing and running around the dance floor as mascots are supposed to do. Then the principal came up to say a few words and introduce the school band. Charles and Richard had a plan though. After the band started playing, they got behind the principal and started carrying him. The principal started yelling, but Charles and Richard didn't listen. They started walking closer and closer to the pool that was on the other side of the gym. Before the principal realized what was going to happen, they let him go directly into the pool. Everyone started laughing. Charles and Richard ran out of the gym quickly. No one realized they were Charles and Richard. Of course, the next day they got caught. They were really in trouble. Kevin Turner was a trusting guy, but his girlfriend Carol Adams wasn't so trusting. Whenever Kevin wanted to hang out with his friends, Carol would look at him and say, "Who are you really seeing?" At first Kevin took it as a joke, but soon Carol started getting carried away with it. When he went out with her, she would lie about not having her phone just so that she could see his phone. She would check his text messages and calls. She would check his Facebook and Twitter. I asked Kevin one day why he was still with her. He simply said that he had a plan. I was curious about his plan, but he didn't want to tell me what it was. After they had been going out for a couple of months, Kevin started going out to clubs, and Carol would always tag along. Kevin would say that he forgot his wallet and if she could pay. Apart from being jealous, Carol was actually willing to pay for a lot of Kevin's things. It turned out that all that jealousy had turned Kevin into a different person. Kevin started getting Carol to buy him things. She paid for his cell phone, for his car payments, for his clothes, and for his rent. I asked Kevin why he was still with her. He told me that he had another plan. One day, Carol had a fight with her best friend. When it was all over, she went to talk to Kevin at his house, but he wasn't home. It turned out that Kevin had always liked Carol's best friend. He kept it secret, but once he found out that they had started fighting, he realized that it was his chance. Kevin eventually got in a relationship with Carol's best friend. Carol eventually got over Kevin. Jealousy is not a good look on a person, Kevin said. He told me that he did what he did because of how jealous Carol was. Brian Nelson got his first skateboard when he was 9 years old. He started skating right away. He had friends at school that knew how to skate, so he would go to their houses after school. As time went by, Brian got better and better at skating. He could do a lot of tricks on his skateboard, but what Brian really loved was jumping over stairs with his skateboard. His record was 15 stairs, but he wanted to beat that record. Brian and his friends went to the Hollywood 18, where a lot of skaters go to make skating videos. Brian knew that if he jumped over those stairs, he would become a legend with his friends. As he went up to the stairs, he started counting each stair one by one. He wanted to make sure they passed 15. On his first try, Brian jumped off his skateboard and landed on the grass next to the stairs. He wanted to try again, but he was scared. He finally got the nerve to try it again. This time he actually jumped over some stairs. Unfortunately, he didn't pass the 16th step in the staircase. He fell off his board, but he didn't get that hurt. Some girls were looking at Brian and asked him if he could do it again. Brian knew he had to get it this time. As Brian prepared for his jump, he kept looking at the girls that had gathered to see him. He was breathing heavy, but he knew he could do it. The time had arrived. Brian was ready to try it again. He pushed off the pavement and started pedaling his skateboard faster and faster. He got to the top of the stairs and then he jumped. Brian was in the air for about 5 seconds, and then he landed. The girls all applauded, and then Brian stopped his skateboard. He had done it. He beat his record. All the girls went up to give him a hug, but they all stayed away, because he smelled. He started laughing. Everyone laughed and congratulated Brian. When Donna was a little girl, she had a dog named Sandy. Sandy was a furry, brown, medium-sized dog. She weighed about 25 lbs, and was a happy dog. Donna was only 10 years old, and couldn't remember a day in her life without Sandy by her side. Sandy was Donna's best friend. The two could be seen together on most days. Donna cared for Sandy every day. She fed her, brushed her, and played with her. Donna went with Sandy whenever it was time to take her to the veterinarian's office for a physical checkup. Donna always wanted to be with her furry friend on those occasions because she didn't want Sandy to feel alone and afraid. Donna was also responsible for cleaning up after Sandy, which meant picking up her poop. Donna didn't mind though. She loved Sandy. One day, Donna and Sandy were coming home from the park. They were walking down the street near their home when Donna let Sandy off her leash. Donna knew she wasn't supposed to let her off the leash, but she always did, when they were just a few houses away. Sandy would run into the yard, yelping and howling while waiting for Donna to get home. This day was different though. Sandy saw a cat across the street and started running after the cat, just as Donna's neighbor was driving home. Sandy was hit and killed by the speeding car as Donna screamed in shock. "No!" yelled Donna, but it was too late. Sandy was gone. Donna was very sad. She blamed herself for Sandy's tragic death, but her mom told her that Sandy was happy in heaven now. Donna held a little service for her doggy and buried her in the backyard, so that Sandy would always be near her. Donna knew they would be together again. One of the favorite American holidays is Christmas. The holiday has a special meaning to most Americans today. It is an official government holiday celebrated on December 25th. Most Americans get both Christmas Day and Christmas Eve off from their jobs so that they can spend time with their families. Many people are busy buying gifts for their loved ones in preparation for the big day. Christmas Day is the time when families open presents that they have given each other. The presents are wrapped in beautiful paper, and usually include a colorful bow and a tag with a person's name on it. These presents are placed under a tree that is brought into their home and decorated with bright ornaments by the entire family. When Michelle was a little girl, she loved helping her mom and dad decorate the Christmas tree. It all began by going to a Christmas tree lot, where vendors sold freshly cut trees to the public. Families can walk through the lots to pick the tree that is right for them. Michelle loved going to shop for a tree because of the sweet aroma that would come from the trees. "I like this one, Daddy," Michelle said. "It's perfect." Her dad agreed and bought the tree. It was just the right size, with full, green branches. Once the tree was brought home, Michelle helped her mother place the tree in the right spot, and began decorating it. Her brothers and sister would help, too. This was always a great family tradition. They put a string of flickering lights around the tree, along with pretty ornaments of different kinds. Each family member got to place their own special ornament on the tree right where they wanted to. The colors blue, red, yellow, and red would blink on and off and would shine brightly, reflecting off the ornaments. As the family stood and viewed the decorated tree, all were smiling. Michelle turned to her father and said, "Thank you, Daddy." Stephen Baker loves his car. He owns a beautiful 1977 Chevrolet Corvette that he bought many years ago. Steve, as he is known to his friends, got a great deal on the car. He bought it from a guy who was the original owner. This is the best possible situation a used car buyer can find. The car culture in California is unique. Detroit automakers look to California for trends to include into their car designs. Many people in California like lower cars, which make them look sleeker and more streamlined. This comes from the practice of cruising the boulevard, an activity that is very popular among people of all ages, especially in Southern California. It was Saturday night in August. Steve gave me a call to see what I was doing that night. "Hey, let's go cruising, brother," said Steve. And of course I said yes. I loved cruising in his car. The girls loved that car. It was a two-seater with a T-top roof that is removable. That night we cruised Van Nuys BLVD, a popular street where lots of young people like cruising. This is where guys can meet girls and vice versa. It wasn't long before we spotted a carload of girls in an old Ford Thunderbird. "Hey!" I shouted to the girls as we came up near them. "Anyone want to cruise with us?" I said, and to my surprise a couple of young blondes jumped in and we drove away. It was a tight fit, but the girls were small and thin. I was in heaven. Before long, I was dating one of them, and Steve dated the other. We went on a few double dates after that, but Steve and his folks moved away 1 year later and I never heard from him again. That was a sad day in my life, but at least I had a new girlfriend, thanks to him and his 1977 Corvette. "My dad's taking us to Santa Monica today," said Carol. "Do you want to go with us?" Laura loved to go to the beach, so she said she would be happy to. Santa Monica Beach is one of the most beautiful beaches in California. There are more scenic views on the coastline up and down the state, but many are inaccessible to beachgoers. Santa Monica has a very large beach area that features white sand and lots of room to play. Carol liked to toss a frisbee around with her friends and to play volleyball. "Do you want to play volleyball, Laura?" Carol asked when they got there. "Sure," said Laura, "but who are we going to play with?" "It takes more than 2 people to play. Carol thought about it, and said that they should start playing, and others will join in, so the two girls started playing alone. Just as Carol said, more kids came over and wanted to play with them. Soon they had more than enough people for a game, and they played for hours. After the game, the girls wanted to cool off, so they decided to jump into the ocean for a little relief. The water was crowded, but that just added to the fun. It was cool and wet, and the waves were just right. Some people were surfing both on surfboards and bodyboards, while others were swimming out to the buoys. On the coastline, two girls were digging for seashells, and one man was using his metal detector to find hidden treasure. Carol ran up to the man and asked him what he was looking for. He said, "Anything I can find, young lady." Carol laughed and asked him if she could try. "Sure, why not?" said the man. So Carol started scanning the beach and soon found a necklace. The man let her keep. "Why not?" said the man. "You found it." Carol was very happy and ran to tell Laura. Little Tommy had been bugging his parents to teach him how to swim. He was only 6 years old, but he wanted to learn ever since watching the London Summer Olympics. He was only 4 years old at the time, but he remembers watching Michael Phelps win 6 gold medals and wanted to be just like him. Tommy's parents thought he was too young at the time, but decided the time was right to give him lessons. Many homes in the United States have swimming pools, but Tommy's did not. His parents lived in a condominium, which is like an apartment complex. So Tommy's parents took him to the local YMCA to enroll him into swimming classes. "This place is big," said Tommy. "Everyone is so big and strong." Tommy was just a kid, but he was determined to learn how to swim. When the family reached the pool, Tommy's jaw almost dropped to the floor. He was amazed at the size of the pool. He had never seen anything so large in his life. It was an Olympic-sized pool and there were many swimmers, doing laps while others were just playing around, or diving off the 3 diving boards. Tommy got even more excited. After the left, there were a group of kids about Tommy's age, who were already in a swimming class. Some of the younger kids were crying, but that was okay with Tommy. He was not afraid though. He was determined to learn how to swim. Mary always loved dancing. She especially loved dancing different styles from across Latin America. In college she took classes to learn mambo and cha-cha. Both dances were originally from Cuba. Her friends from the Dominican Republic showed Mary how to dance merengue and bachata. A Puerto Rican friend held a salsa dancing party in her house. Before then Mary always just thought salsa was something you ate on tacos or with narcos. She had no idea it was also the name of a dance style. One dance style that Mary had yet to try was tango from Argentina. Tango seemed so complicated to Mary. The footwork was very intricate. She imagined she would end up stepping on her partner's feet. Mary hadn't had a tango partner yet. She didn't have a dance partner in general. In classes, instructors always paired her up with fellow classmates. At dance clubs it was easy to find a dance partner. Tango classes were expensive though. Mary didn't even think there were any tango clubs. One day Mary received an email from a friend with information about a tango night outside the city's music center. Musicians would be playing tango music and instructors would teach the basic steps. The best of all, the event was free, and no partner was required on the night of the tango event. Mary wore her high-heeled dancing shoes. There was a wooden dance floor in the middle of the music center plaza. A group of musicians played on a small stage in front of the dance floor. "May I have this dance?" a man asked Mary when she arrived. He wore a sticker with the words "dance instructor" on it. Mary accepted the invitation to dance. That night Mary learned that it did take 2 to tango. When James divorced his wife Patricia, he moved out of the house they bought together. James and Patricia shared custody of their teenager son Robert. Robert would stay with his father 4 days a week, from Thursday through Sunday. At first James didn't mind leaving behind the family dog Spot. James and Patricia bought the dog when Robert was just a 3-year-old toddler. Not having to take care of Spot meant James didn't have to worry about cleaning up after the dog, and budgeting for dog food and treats. James also didn't have to worry about taking the dog to the vet and the expensive vet bills. 2 years after James divorced Patricia, he remarried. His new wife Linda had 2 daughters. The 2 daughters got along well with James's son Robert. The 2 daughters had never had a pet though. One of them was very allergic to cats and Linda was not an animal person. She thought they were too much work and required too much attention. Her daughters really wanted a pet though. James had an idea. Just like he shared custody of Robert with his ex-wife, what if he shared custody of the dog Spot? James could bring the dog to the house when he picked up James every Thursday and bring the dog back to his ex-wife's house on Sunday. Linda thought it was an interesting idea and agreed to try it. James's ex-wife Patricia really liked the idea. It gave her a break from having to take care of Spot. Robert was really happy because he didn't have to leave his dog behind, and his best animal friend could be with him all the time. Linda's daughters were especially happy to have a part-time pet. Now we have a step-brother and a step-pet, they said. Nancy was ready to get a cell phone. She had never had one before. She thought that they were too expensive. She worried about the cost of the phone itself. She worried about the monthly bill she had to pay. Nancy's credit rating wasn't so good because she had a student loan she was paying off. Nancy heard that cell phone companies rejecting people because they had poor credit. However, she needed a phone. She wanted people to be able to get in touch with her no matter where she was. She wanted to have a cell phone in case of an emergency, so she decided to go to a local cell phone company store and see if they would work with her. The clerk at the cell phone store was very helpful. He was willing to work with Nancy to find a cell phone plan that worked with her budget. He checked Nancy's credit and found out that her credit rating was not very high. He told Nancy that this didn't mean she couldn't have a cell phone. Nancy could get a no contract or prepaid cell phone. The clerk explained to Nancy that her credit would not be checked, and she wouldn't have to sign a contract that tied her to a specific phone or service. With a prepaid phone, she would pay the same amount of money every month. The cost depended on how many minutes she wanted to be able to talk, how much text messaging she planned on doing, and if she was going to use the phone to access the internet. A prepaid phone plan meant that Nancy would not get a special deal on a phone though. She would have to pay full price and no special discounts would apply. Nancy had some choices to make. Sally loved her brown stuffed teddy bear. It was old, worn out, and missing an eye, but Sally loved it all the same. One day her mother took her to the neighborhood playground, so that Sally could play with her friend Johnny. Johnny's mom was friends with Sally's mom. Seeing that she never left the house without her bear, Sally's mom took the teddy bear with her. After Sally had played long enough, she fell asleep on her mom's arms. Her mom put her back into the small minivan and drove back home. As she was putting Sally to sleep, she woke up and asked for her teddy bear. The mom went looking for it in the minivan, but she couldn't find it. She went to Sally's room and told her that the bear had been lost. Sally started crying. She cried all night until she fell asleep. As Sally's mom was clearing the dining room table, she heard a knock at the door. She opened it, and saw Johnny's mom standing at the doorstep with the old worn-out bear. She started jumping with joy and thanked Johnny's mom. Sally's mom walked slowly into Sally's room, raised up Sally's blanket, and placed the bear under Sally's arms. She then turned around to Sally's desk looking at the picture of Sally's dad giving her the bear as he left to the army. She smiled and kissed Sally on the forehead, then gave one to the bear as well. It was a hot summer day in Los Angeles. The temperature for the day was about 95 degrees Fahrenheit. Susie, a little girl, loved sitting on the porch to watch the boys playing in the yard. Today, her friends were riding their bikes up and down the street. The two boys were Joey and Bob, and they were trying to see who could ride their bikes faster. On one race, Bobby got out to a big lead, but Joey was getting closer. Bobby was getting tired, and Joey was able to pass him. Susie was having fun watching them when her mother came outside and asked her what she was doing. "I'm watching the boys ride their bicycles, Mommy," she said. Then Susie asked her mom if she could teach her how to ride. Her mom thought about it for a while. She was thinking that Susie might be too young to learn how to ride, but in the end, she thought it was time for her to learn. Susie was only 4 years old at the time. She was a little scared at first, but she loved the bike her mother had bought her and was very excited. Her mom held on to the bike as Susie slowly started to pedal. She gained speed and was having fun when she fell on the sidewalk, scraping her knee. Susie began to cry from the pain, but her mom told her she was okay. After a few minutes, Susie stopped crying and got back on her bike and started pedaling again. She fell a few more times, but didn't cry much after that. She just kept getting up and tried again and again. Susie was learning how to keep her balance and was riding along when she noticed that her mother wasn't holding the bike anymore. She got scared, but soon realized she could ride a bike all by herself. Susie was very happy. In 2012, Joe started going to community college. He wanted to learn new things and make new friends. He was nervous the night before the school started and could not sleep. When he woke up in the morning, he couldn't wait to take the bus to school. The first day of school was very exciting for him. He saw many types of people all around. There were tall buildings everywhere, which was just like his dreams. He hoped he wouldn't get lost on his way to class. Joe's asked for directions to his class from a person. The person told him where to go, and Joe's hurried to his class. He thought he was going to be late. Then he slipped on some mud and fell. His brand new Levi's jeans got muddy. Fortunately, he made it to class on time. His teacher asked him what had happened to his pants. After the class, Joe's had to take the bus home. When he reached into his pockets, he realized he had no bus fare. How am I going to get home? Joe said to himself. One helpful person heard this and gave him $1.50. Joe thanked the person and got on the bus. Joe was hungry when he got home. He had not eaten the whole day. He went to the kitchen to see what his mother was cooking. He jumped for joy when he saw that she was cooking chicken in mole, which was his favorite Mexican dish. The food was not yet ready. Joe had to wait 15 more minutes. By the time the food was prepared, his stomach was hurting. Joe quickly ate all his food. Carol is a high school junior at Roosevelt High School. She is having a tough time getting good grades in her classes. She understands the material, but she often does not turn in her homework. She does not feel motivated or inspired to do her work. There is one class she is doing well in. That class is United States History. Carol always turns in her homework for US History class. The reason she is doing well in that class is because she respects the teacher Mr. Aragon. Carol feels that Mr. Aragon treats her more like a peer than a student. She feels the other teachers look down on her. Carol's mother Maria tells Mr. Aragon that Carol is struggling in her other classes at a parent-teacher conference. Maria hopes that Mr. Aragon can help inspire Carol to do better in her other classes. Mr. Aragon is surprised to learn that Carol is not doing well in other classes. She is such a smart young woman, he tells Maria. Mr. Aragon tells Maria that he will speak to her daughter. Maria is grateful and hopes Mr. Aragon's intervention will help. Carol feels embarrassed when Mr. Aragon speaks to her about the trouble she is having in other classes. However, she understands that he is just trying to help. Mr. Aragon and Carol discuss what she can do to motivate herself to hand in homework for other classes. They create a list of strategies to help motivate her to complete her homework on time. One idea is to create a checklist of assignments. Another idea is to have a friend encourage Carol to complete and hand in assignments. This is called the buddy system. Carol decides to try one technique at a time to see which one works best for her. Barbara dropped out of college 17 years ago when she had her first daughter. She always regretted dropping out. She had been a good student and enjoyed going to classes in college. However, when she had her daughter, she didn't have time to continue with her studies. She needed to find a full-time job. Barbara also regretted dropping out of college because it was hard to find a good job without a college degree. While Barbara was lucky enough to always find work, some of the jobs she had didn't pay well. Most of them didn't offer benefits like vacation pay and health insurance. Barbara was sure that if she had a college degree, finding a better paying job with benefits would be easier. Barbara's daughter was now a teenager. She was beginning to look at colleges. This inspired Barbara to go back to school herself. Barbara wanted to finally get her bachelor's degree. Since her daughter was in high school, Barbara had more time. She didn't have to constantly watch over her daughter. However, even as a teenager, Barbara's daughter still needed to eat and needed clothes, so going to college on a regular schedule was not an option for Barbara. Barbara went to the local community college to learn about her options. A college counselor told her that she could take online classes to finish her degree. Barbara was worried that these classes wouldn't give the same credit as a traditional college class would. The counselor told her the credits were the same, and online classes were good for non-traditional students like her. Barbara enrolled and became a student again.